Single dad saves drowning woman and child, then discovers they're the first family. When Noah Parker dove into a hurricane-torn sea to rescue a drowning mother and son, he had no idea his heroic act would thrust him into the center of a national firestorm. The woman he saved wasn't just any stranger. She was Elena Rivers, the First Lady of the United States. What followed wasn't gratitude, but suspicion, betrayal, and a town that turned its back on him. But before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. We want to see how far this story travels. Now let's begin where it all started, on a storm-ravaged beach where one man's courage would change everything. The sky over Briar Point had turned the color of charcoal in rage. Noah Parker stood at the edge of his weathered deck, coffee mug cooling in his calloused hands, watching the Atlantic Ocean transform into something biblical. Dawn should have been breaking, but the storm had swallowed the sun whole, leaving only a bruised twilight that made it impossible to tell if it was 6 in the morning or the end of the world. The wind screamed. It wasn't the gentle coastal breeze that usually carried the smell of salt and possibility through their small fishing town. This was different. This was the kind of wind that tore shingles from roofs and uprooted trees that had stood for generations. The kind that made even the oldest fishermen, men who'd spent their entire lives reading the ocean's moods, pull their boats far inland and pray. "Daddy?" The voice came from behind him, small and uncertain. Noah turned to find his daughter, Mia, standing in the doorway, her dark hair tousled from sleep, clutching the stuffed dolphin she'd had since she was 3. She was 12 now, almost 13, but storms still scared her. Hell, they scared him too, though he'd never admit it. "Hey, baby girl." Noah set down his mug and opened his arms. Mia crossed the deck and pressed herself against his chest, and he wrapped her up tight, his chin resting on the top of her head. She smelled like the lavender shampoo her mother used to buy, the one Noah kept ordering online even though it cost twice as much as the stuff from the grocery store. Some things were worth the extra money. Some memories needed to be preserved. "Sounds angry," Mia whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind's howl. "It does, doesn't it?" Noah agreed. He'd learned in the 3 years since Sarah died that honesty served Mia better than platitudes. She was too smart for the kind of empty reassurances some parents offered. "But we're safe here. This house has weathered worse." It was true, mostly. The Parker house sat a quarter-mile back from the beach, perched on a small rise that had protected it through countless nor'easters and hurricanes. The bones of the place were solid. Noah's grandfather had built it with his own hands back in 1952, using timber that could withstand anything the Atlantic threw at it. "Can I stay home from school?" Mia asked, tilting her head back to look up at him with those hazel eyes that were so much like her mother's, it sometimes hurt to meet her gaze. "School's already canceled, sweetheart. Nobody's going anywhere in this mess." Noah glanced at his watch, 6:47 a.m. His shift at the docks was supposed to start at 7, but he'd already gotten the text from his supervisor. "Stay home. Harbor's closed till further notice." "Want pancakes?" he offered, hoping to distract her from the storm's fury. "I'll even let you put chocolate chips in them." That earned him a small smile. "Can we eat them on the couch and watch a movie?" "You drive a hard bargain, Parker." Noah ruffled her hair. "But you've got yourself a deal." They'd just made it inside when Noah's phone erupted with a shrill, insistent tone, the emergency alert sound that made his pulse spike even after all these years of hearing it. He grabbed the device from the kitchen counter, Mia hovering close behind him. "Emergency alert, National Weather Service, hurricane warning in effect. Storm surge of 8 to 12 feet, expected coastal flooding imminent, seek higher ground immediately." 12 feet, Noah muttered, his mind already calculating. Their house would be fine, but the lower-lying areas of town, the marina, the boardwalk, all those rental cottages built too close to the water by developers who cared more about ocean views than safety codes, those places were in serious trouble. "Daddy," Mia's voice had gone small again. "Are people going to be okay?" Before Noah could answer, another sound cut through the storm's roar, a sound that made his blood run cold even though he'd been trained to respond to it, even though he'd spent 5 years of his life waiting to hear it. It was the emergency siren from the volunteer fire station, the one they only activated for the worst situations. 3 long blasts, a pause, then 3 more. The pattern that meant one thing: water rescue needed. All available personnel respond. Noah's body responded before his mind caught up. He was already moving toward the closet where he kept his old gear. The wetsuit that still fit, even though it had been years since he'd worn it. The reflective vest, the rope bag, the fins. Muscle memory took over, his hands working with practiced efficiency, even as his brain screamed that he wasn't a lifeguard anymore, that he'd hung up that life when Sarah got sick, that he had responsibilities now that went beyond diving into dangerous water to save strangers. "Daddy, what are you doing?" Mia's voice rose in pitch, edging toward panic. Noah paused, the wetsuit half on, and looked at his daughter. Really looked at her. She was standing in the middle of their living room, her stuffed dolphin clutched so tight her knuckles had gone white, her eyes wide with the same fear he'd seen the day he explained that Mommy wasn't coming home from the hospital. He should stay. The rational part of his brain knew that. He had a daughter to think about. He wasn't 19 anymore, wasn't invincible, wasn't the Noah Parker who used to dive off cliffs and swim through riptides like it was nothing. He was 40 years old with a bad knee and a daughter who'd already lost one parent. But that siren kept wailing, and somewhere out there in that churning gray chaos, someone was in the water. Someone was drowning, and Noah Parker had never been able to ignore that sound. "Listen to me, baby." He crouched down so he was at eye level with Mia, his hands on her shoulders. "I need you to do something for me. I need you to go to Mrs. Chen's house next door and wait for me there. Can you do that?" "You're going out in the storm." It wasn't a question. "Someone needs help, Mia." "Someone always needs help." The words burst out of her, sharp and accusatory. "What about me? What if something happens to you? What if you don't come back?" The question hung between them like a physical thing, heavy and impossible to dismiss, because it was valid. God, it was so valid it made Noah's chest tight. "I will come back," he said, putting every ounce of certainty he could muster into those 4 words. "I promise you, I will always come back." "You can't promise that." Mia's voice broke. "Mommy didn't come back." Noah felt something crack inside his chest. He pulled his daughter close, holding her while the siren wailed and the wind tried to tear their house apart and the ocean raged against the shore. "You're right," he whispered into her hair. "I can't promise nothing will ever happen to me, but I can promise I'll fight like hell to get back to you, always." He pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. "And you know why? Because you're my reason. You're my reason for everything." Mia sniffled, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Be careful." "Always am." It was a lie they both needed him to tell. He finished pulling on his wetsuit, grabbed his gear, and pulled Mia into one more fierce hug before nudging her toward the door. "Mrs. Chen's house, right now, and stay away from the windows." He watched until she made it safely next door, saw Mrs. Chen, their 70-something neighbor who had basically adopted them after Sarah died, pull Mia inside. Only then did Noah turn toward the beach. The walk from his house to the shore usually took 5 minutes. Today, fighting against wind that felt like a physical opponent trying to shove him backward, it took 15. Rain lashed his face like needles. The emergency siren had gone silent, which somehow made everything worse. The silence meant either the rescue was over or the situation was so dire they needed everyone to hear instructions over the radio. Noah's radio crackled to life on his vest. Multiple reports of individuals in the water near the South Jetty. Repeat, multiple individuals in the water. Static swallowed the rest. The South Jetty. Noah altered his course, running now, his old lifeguard training kicking in. Don't think, just move. Don't calculate the odds, just respond. Someone in the water meant seconds mattered. Minutes meant the difference between a rescue and a recovery. He crested the dune and the full scope of the disaster hit him. The ocean had transformed into something alien and furious. Waves as tall as buildings rolled toward shore, their faces steep and dark, crowned with wind-torn foam. The beach had vanished under the surge, water reaching all the way to the dune line. And there, maybe 50 yards offshore, being tossed in the surf like rag dolls, were 2 figures. No, Not just two figures. A woman and a child. Noah's training told him to wait for backup, to never go in alone, to assess the situation, call for support, use the proper equipment. His training could go to hell. He dropped his gear bag, kept only the rope and his fins, and ran straight into the water. The cold hit him like a freight train, stealing his breath despite the wetsuit. The surge tried to knock him off his feet, but Noah dove under the first wave, using the techniques he'd learned during his years guarding the beaches. You don't fight the ocean, you work with it. You find the rhythm in the chaos. The second wave caught him wrong, tumbling him sideways, filling his mouth with salt water that tasted like rage and ancient things. He kicked hard, breaking the surface, gasping for air. Rain hammered his face. The shore was already distant, farther than it should have been after just seconds in the water. The rip current was pulling him out, the same current that probably dragged the woman and child off the beach in the first place. Use it, his old instructor's voice echoed in his head. Use the rip to get out to them, then swim parallel to work your way back. Noah stopped fighting the outward pull and let it carry him, using his energy to angle toward where he'd seen the figures. The woman first. He could see her now, barely keeping her head above water, her arms wrapped around something. The child. Hold on, he shouted, but the wind ripped the words away. 20 yards, 15. He was close enough now to see details. The woman's dark hair plastered to her skull, the small body she clutched with desperate strength, the absolute terror in her eyes. 10 yards. A wave rose between them, and Noah dove through it, kicking hard. When he surfaced, the woman was sinking. No, 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 no. He covered the final distance in 4 powerful strokes, diving down into the murky water, his hands searching, finding fabric, then flesh, then the small weight of the child. He grabbed them both, kicking for the surface with everything he had. They broke into the air together. The woman was coughing, choking, barely conscious. The child wasn't moving. I've got you, Noah gasped, trying to keep all their heads above water. I've got you both. The woman's eyes focused on him for just a moment. He saw something in them. Recognition, maybe? Or just the desperate hope that comes from being pulled back from the edge of death. Then her eyes rolled back and she went limp. No, hey! Noah grabbed her face, tilting it up. Stay with me! But she was gone, unconscious, her full weight now his to bear along with the child's. And they were far from shore, in water that wanted to kill them, in a storm that showed no signs of mercy. Noah's training had prepared him for this moment, but his training had assumed he'd have backup, equipment, a fighting chance. Instead, he had 2 unconscious people, his own rapidly depleting strength, and an ocean that seemed personally offended by his audacity. He made a choice. He rolled onto his back, pulling the woman and child on top of his chest, using his body as a flotation device. Then he started to kick, angling parallel to the shore, using the technique that had saved his own life more than once. Don't fight the rip. Swim across it. Work your way back gradually. His legs burned, his arms screamed. The child's weight pressed against his chest, and he couldn't tell if the small body was breathing or if the movement he felt was just the water's motion. Come on, he grunted, kicking harder. Come on, damn it! He thought about Mia, about the promise he'd made, about the look on her face when he'd walked out the door. He thought about Sarah, about the way she'd fought the cancer right up until the end, never giving up even when the odds were impossible. You don't get to quit, Parker, he told himself. Not today. Not ever. A wave caught them, lifting them up, and for a moment Noah could see the beach. Figures there now, people, fire trucks, flashing lights painting the gray morning in shades of red and blue. Then the wave crashed and they tumbled, and Noah lost his grip on the woman. He grabbed wildly, catching her arm, pulling her back, refusing to let go, even though his muscles were fire and his lungs were screaming and every instinct said to save himself, to let them go, to survive. But Noah Parker was a lot of things. A failed husband who couldn't save his wife from cancer, a dock worker who'd given up his calling, a single father who was probably traumatizing his daughter right now. But he had never been a quitter. His foot scraped bottom, sand, solid sand. He'd made it to the shallows. Noah found his footing and stood, the woman and child dead weight in his arms. The shore was right there, maybe 20 yards, but it looked like 20 miles. Each step was agony. His legs trembled. The surge tried to knock him down with every wave. "Almost there," he wheezed. "Almost." Someone was running toward him through the surf. Then two someones. Three. Hands reached for him, for the woman, for the child. Voices shouting over the storm. "I got them." "Jesus, Noah. Get the kid. Get the kid." They pulled the child from his arms first, and that's when Noah realized how small the body was. Maybe 6 years old, maybe younger. A boy with dark hair and skin that had gone the wrong shade of blue. "He's not breathing," someone shouted. Noah lunged forward, but his legs gave out. He crashed to his knees in the surf, other hand still supporting the woman. "Give him to me!" They laid the boy on the beach, above the waterline, and Noah scrambled over on hands and knees. His lifeguard training took over, automatic, muscle memory that went deeper than thought. He tilted the boy's head back, cleared his airway, checked for breathing. Nothing. He placed his hands on the small chest and started compressions, counting in his head, aware of people gathering around, of the woman being carried away, of the storm still raging. "Come on, kid." Compressions. "Come on." More compressions. "Don't you dare." He gave 2 rescue breaths. "Don't you dare quit on me." Nothing. More compressions. Harder this time, pressing down with enough force to maybe crack ribs, but that was better than being dead. That was better than this child never taking another breath, never laughing again. Never! The boy convulsed. Water poured from his mouth. His eyes flew open, wide and terrified and beautifully, impossibly alive. He sucked in a huge, gasping breath and started to cry. Noah sagged forward, his forehead nearly touching the sand, relief so intense it made him dizzy. "That's it," he breathed. "That's it, buddy. You're okay. You're okay now." Someone wrapped a blanket around the boy. Someone else pulled Noah to his feet. The world tilted and spun, and he realized he was hypothermic, exhausted, possibly in shock. But the boy was crying, which meant he was breathing, which meant Noah had done it. "Daddy?" The voice cut through everything. Noah turned to see Mia sprinting down the beach, Mrs. Chen calling after her but unable to keep up. His daughter crashed into him with enough force to nearly knock him down again, her arms wrapping around his waist. "Daddy, you did it!" she sobbed into his chest. "You saved them!" Noah held his daughter with shaking arms and looked back at the ocean. The woman, they'd gotten her to one of the ambulances, were loading her inside now. The boy was being carried by a paramedic, still crying but conscious and responsive. He'd saved them, both of them. He'd gone into impossible water and brought back 2 lives that would have been lost. And he'd made it back to Mia, just like he'd promised. "Let's get you checked out, Noah." That was Tom Rodriguez, one of the fire department EMTs and an old friend. "You're shaking like a leaf." "I'm fine," Noah managed, but his teeth were chattering so hard he could barely get the words out. "Bullshit. Come on." They guided him to another ambulance, wrapped him in heated blankets, checked his vitals. Noah let them fuss over him, too exhausted to protest. Mia never left his side, her hand gripping his so tight he could feel her pulse. "The woman and the kid," Noah asked. "They gonna make it?" "Woman's unconscious but stable," Tom reported. "The boy's responding well. Scared, but that's normal. Thanks to you that they're both alive." It should have felt like victory, like vindication for all those years of training, for the skills he thought he'd never use again. But all Noah felt was tired. So incredibly, deeply tired. "Sir?" A new voice. Noah looked up to find a man in a dark suit standing outside the ambulance, rain dripping off him like he didn't even notice. Something about him screamed authority. "I need to ask you a few questions." "He needs medical attention," Tom protested. "This will only take a moment." The man's eyes never left Noah's face. "Can you describe the woman and child you rescued?" Noah frowned. I don't know. Dark hair on both of them. The boy was maybe 6? The woman? Mid-30s? He shook his head. "I wasn't really paying attention to details. I was trying not to let them drown." "Did she say anything to you? Identify herself?" "She was unconscious most of the time. Why? What's this about?" The man exchanged a glance with someone behind him, another suited figure Noah hadn't noticed. Where are they now? The first man asked. Memorial Hospital, Tom answered. Both were transported about 10 minutes ago. The suited man pulled out a phone and spoke rapidly in a voice too low for Noah to hear. Then he turned back to Noah. Mr. Parker, is it? Yeah, Noah Parker. Mr. Parker, on behalf of certain parties, I want to thank you for your actions today. You showed extraordinary courage. There was something off about the way he said it, something formal and rehearsed. Noah's exhaustion made it hard to care. I just did what anyone would do. No. The man's expression softened just slightly. You did what very few people could do. Your daughter should be proud. Mia pressed closer to Noah's side. The suited man nodded once, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the chaos of emergency vehicles and storm-tossed beach. That was weird, Tom muttered. Everything about today is weird, Noah replied. They kept him in the ambulance another 20 minutes, making sure his core temperature was rising, that he wasn't going into delayed shock. By the time they released him, the storm had started to ease, the wind dropping from its apocalyptic howl to just a strong gale. Mrs. Chen insisted on driving them home in her ancient Buick, clucking over both of them like a mother hen. Foolish man, she kept saying, but her eyes were wet. Foolish, brave man. Back at the house, Noah showered until the hot water ran out, then stood under the cold water for another 5 minutes just to feel something. When he finally emerged, dressed in old sweats, he found Mia in the kitchen making grilled cheese sandwiches. I figured you'd be hungry, she said quietly. Noah pulled her into a hug. I love you, baby girl. You know that? I know. She squeezed him tight. I'm glad you came back. Always will, he promised. Always. They ate their sandwiches in front of the TV, watching the news coverage of the storm. The damage was extensive, flooding throughout the lower areas of town, trees down, power out in half the county. But the death toll, miraculously, was 0. Noah was halfway through his second sandwich when his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Mr. Parker? This is Lisa Chen from WOCN News. The woman's voice was bright and urgent. I was wondering if we could set up an interview with you about the rescue this morning. What? How did you get this number? It's public record, Mr. Parker. Listen, we'd really love to hear your story. The heroic single dad who dove into a hurricane to save a drowning mother and child. That's compelling stuff. I'm not interested in an interview. We could compensate you for your time. No, thank you, but no. Noah hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Different number. Then again. And again. By the time he finally turned the phone off completely, he'd received calls from 6 different news outlets, 3 radio stations, and something called a talent agency that wanted to discuss opportunities. What's happening? Mia asked, watching him with worried eyes. I don't know, Noah admitted. But deep in his gut, he had a feeling that the rescue, the storm, the risk, the 2 lives saved, was just the beginning of something much bigger. He had no idea how right he was. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the storm having blown itself out over the Atlantic. Noah woke to find his street packed with news vans. What the hell? He stood at the window, coffee in hand, staring at the circus that had assembled outside his house overnight. Satellite trucks, cameras, people with microphones. All waiting. His phone, which he'd foolishly turned back on, immediately started buzzing. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails. His sister from Florida. Are you insane? It's all over the news. His cousin from Oregon. Dude, you're a hero. His old friend from the Coast Guard. Parker, you magnificent bastard, you still got it. Noah scrolled through his missed calls and froze. Governor's office, state police, and one that just said White House Communications. Mia, he called. Stay away from the windows. His daughter appeared in the hallway, already dressed for school, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Why are there so many people outside? I'm about to find out. Noah pulled on jeans and a flannel shirt, his standard uniform, and stepped out onto his porch. Immediately, the crowd surged forward, microphones thrust toward him, cameras flashing, questions shouted over each other. Mr. Parker, how does it feel to be a hero? Did you know who you were saving? Were you scared? What was going through your mind? Can you describe the moment you pulled them from the water? Noah held up his hands. I appreciate y'all's interest, but I don't have anything to say. I did what anyone would have done. But not everyone would have survived, a reporter shouted. Do you have a statement about the First Lady? Another called. Noah froze. The what? The reporters fell silent, glancing at each other with expressions that ranged from surprise to cunning satisfaction. You don't know, one finally said. It wasn't a question. Know what? A woman in the front, perfectly styled hair, expensive suit, the kind of reporter who probably worked for one of the major networks, smiled at him like a shark that had just spotted blood in the water. Mr. Parker, the woman you saved yesterday? That was Elena Rivers, the First Lady of the United States, and the child was her son, Matthew, the president's son. The world tilted. Noah grabbed the porch railing to steady himself, his brain trying to process words that didn't make sense. First Lady, president's son. He'd saved... That's impossible, he heard himself say. It's been confirmed by the Secret Service, the reporter continued. They were vacationing at a private residence in Briar Point when they were caught by the storm surge. Their security detail lost them in the chaos. If it wasn't for you, Mr. Parker, the first family would be mourning today. Noah's legs decided to stop supporting him. He sat down hard on the porch steps, his mind reeling. The suited men at the beach, the questions, the way they'd whisked the woman and boy away so quickly. He'd saved the First Lady. He'd given CPR to the president's son. Oh my God, he breathed. The cameras captured every moment. Within an hour, Noah's phone had become unusable. The calls never stopped. Text messages flooded in faster than he could read them. His email inbox exploded with interview requests, speaking engagement offers, and messages from people he hadn't talked to in 20 years suddenly claiming to be his closest friends. He turned everything off and sat at his kitchen table watching through the window as the media circus outside his house grew larger. More vans, more cameras. A helicopter circled overhead, its rotors creating a constant thrum that made his teeth ache. Daddy, I don't think I can go to school today, Mia said from the doorway. She changed out of her school clothes and back into pajamas, her face pale. They're blocking the driveway. Noah rubbed his face with both hands. Yeah, you're staying home. Mrs. Chen appeared at the back door, letting herself in with the key Noah had given her years ago. She carried a casserole dish covered in foil and wore an expression of fierce protectiveness that reminded him of a mother bear defending her cubs. Those vultures, she spat, setting the casserole on the counter. I tried to shoo them away. They asked me for quotes, like I'm going to help them harass a good man who did a good thing. Thanks, Mrs. Chen. Noah meant it. In the chaos of the last 18 hours, she'd been the only constant, the only person who treated him like he was still just Noah Parker, the guy next door. You need to eat, she insisted, pulling the foil off to reveal what looked like her famous chicken and rice. And that girl needs to eat. You can't deal with this nonsense on an empty stomach. She was right, of course. Noah hadn't eaten since the grilled cheese sandwich yesterday. His stomach felt like it was trying to digest itself. They were halfway through breakfast when someone knocked on the front door. Not the aggressive pounding of reporters, but a calm, authoritative knock that somehow carried more weight. Noah peered through the window and saw two Secret Service agents standing on his porch, their bodies positioned to block the camera's view of the door. Behind them, a black SUV idled in his driveway, having somehow navigated through the media gauntlet. Stay here, Noah told Mia, then opened the door. Mr. Parker. The agent who spoke was a woman, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, her expression unreadable behind sunglasses despite the overcast morning. I'm Agent Morrison. This is Agent Chen. We need you to come with us, please. Am I under arrest? The question sounded absurd even as he asked it, but nothing about the last 24 hours made any sense. No, sir. The First Lady has requested to speak with you personally. She's been asking for you since she regained consciousness yesterday evening. Noah's heart did something complicated in his chest. She's okay? She's recovering well, thanks to you. Agent Morrison's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Will you come with us? I have a daughter. She's welcome to come as well, if you prefer. Or we can arrange for protection detail here while you're gone. The thought of leaving Mia alone with the media circus outside made Noah's stomach turn. She comes with me. Of course. We'll wait while you both get ready. 20 minutes later, Noah and Mia were in the back of the SUV, flanked by Secret Service agents, pulling out of the driveway while reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed. Mia pressed against Noah's side, her eyes wide as she watched the chaos through tinted windows. "Where are we going?" she whispered. "To meet the people I saved," Noah answered, realizing as he said it how surreal the words sounded. They didn't go to Memorial Hospital like Noah expected. Instead, the SUV wound through Briar Point streets, past the damaged boardwalk and flooded marina, heading toward the wealthy section of town where the summer homes of the rich and powerful lined the cliffs overlooking the ocean. These weren't the modest beach cottages that most locals owned. These were estates with security gates and ocean views that probably cost more than Noah would make in 10 lifetimes. The SUV turned into a long driveway guarded by more Secret Service agents and pulled up to a sprawling contemporary house that looked like something from an architecture magazine. All glass and weathered wood and angles that seemed designed to capture every possible ray of sunlight. "The First Lady has been staying here since the incident," Agent Morrison explained as they climbed out. "It's more secure than the hospital, and the president wanted her somewhere she could rest privately." The president. Noah's brain still couldn't fully process that he was about to meet the President of the United States. He'd voted for Jonathan Rivers, had even put a campaign sign in his yard during the election, but the man had always seemed like someone who existed on television, not in real life, not in Briar Point. They were escorted through a foyer that probably cost more than Noah's entire house, down a hallway lined with abstract art that he suspected was the real thing, not prints. Everything was pristine, untouched by the storm that had devastated the rest of the town. Agent Morrison stopped at a closed door. "The First Lady is inside with her son. She's still recovering from the hypothermia and near drowning, so please keep the visit brief." She knocked twice, then opened the door. "Ma'am, Mr. Parker is here." Noah had seen Elena Rivers on television countless times. Campaign rallies, state dinners, public appearances where she smiled and waved and looked like the kind of woman who had been born knowing how to navigate the world of politics and power. But the woman sitting in the chair by the window, wrapped in a cashmere throw with her dark hair loose around her shoulders, looked nothing like the First Lady he'd seen on TV. She looked human, vulnerable, and when she saw Noah, her eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Parker." Her voice was hoarse, probably from all the salt water she'd swallowed. She tried to stand, but Noah held up a hand. "Please, don't get up. You should be resting." "I've been resting for 18 hours. What I should be doing is thanking the man who saved my life." She gestured to the couch across from her. "Please, sit, both of you." Noah guided Mia to the couch, hyper-aware of his flannel shirt and jeans in this space of designer furniture and wealth. The First Lady studied them both with an intensity that made him want to fidget. "This is my daughter, Mia," Noah said, because someone needed to break the silence. "Mia." Elena smiled, and it transformed her entire face, made her look younger and warmer. "What a beautiful name. How old are you, sweetheart?" 12, Mia managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Almost 13. Almost 13 is a very important age." Elena's smile widened. "My son Matthew just turned 7. He's sleeping right now, but he's been asking about you too, Mr. Parker. He doesn't remember much from yesterday, but he knows someone pulled him from the water. Someone saved him." Noah's throat felt tight. "Is he okay? Really okay?" "Thanks to you, yes. The doctor said if he'd been without oxygen for even a minute longer." She stopped, pressing a hand to her mouth, visibly collecting herself. "I'm sorry. It's still very fresh." "You don't have to apologize, ma'am." "Elena, please. I think the man who saved my life can call me by my first name." She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "Mr. Parker." "Noah, I don't know how to adequately express what you did for us. You dove into water that professional rescue swimmers wouldn't enter. You kept us alive when anyone else would have let the ocean take us. You brought my son back from the edge of death." Her voice cracked. "You gave me my child back." Noah didn't know what to say. He'd spent the last 24 hours in a state of shock, his brain unable to fully process the magnitude of what had happened. Hearing it laid out like this, seeing the raw gratitude in her eyes, made it suddenly, devastatingly real. "I just did what needed doing," he finally said. "No." Elena shook her head firmly. "What you did was extraordinary, and the country needs to know about it. The world needs to know that people like you still exist." Something in her tone made warning bells go off in Noah's head. "With respect, ma'am, Elena, I don't need the world to know anything. I'm just a guy from Briar Point who used to be a lifeguard. What happened yesterday was between me and the ocean." "I wish it could be that simple." Elena's expression shifted, became more guarded. "But nothing involving my family is ever simple. The moment you pulled us from that water, you became part of a story that belongs to the nation, and I'm afraid that story has already started being told, with or without your permission." As if on cue, Agent Morrison stepped into the room carrying a tablet. She handed it to Elena without a word. Elena glanced at the screen, and something dark flickered across her face. She turned the tablet toward Noah. "This is trending on every social media platform. It's the top story on every news network. You're everywhere, Noah." Noah took the tablet with hands that had started shaking. The screen showed a news website, and the headline made his stomach drop. "Local hero saves first family. Single dad risks everything in hurricane rescue." Below the headline was a photo someone had taken on the beach. Noah on his knees, performing CPR on Matthew, his face twisted with desperation and determination. It was an intimate moment, a private moment of life and death, now plastered across the internet for millions to see. He scrolled down. More photos. Him being wrapped in blankets by the EMTs, him holding Mia on the beach afterward. And worse, older photos. Pictures of him and Sarah from before she got sick, pulled from who knows where. His LinkedIn profile photo from when he worked at the marina. His high school yearbook picture, for God's sake. Noah Parker, 40, is a dock worker and single father who lost his wife to cancer 3 years ago, the article read. Yesterday, he became an American hero when he dove into hurricane-force waters to save First Lady Elena Rivers and her son Matthew from drowning. According to witnesses, Parker, a former lifeguard, performed the rescue alone, without equipment or backup, in conditions that experts say should have been fatal. His actions saved 2 lives and averted what would have been a national tragedy. "They've been digging into your life," Elena said quietly. "I'm sorry. I know it's an invasion of privacy, but that's the reality of anything connected to my family. They want to know everything about you." Noah handed the tablet back, feeling sick. "They mentioned Sarah." "I know, I'm so sorry. That's not their story to tell." His voice came out harder than he intended. "My wife, my life with her, that's private, that's sacred." "You're absolutely right." Elena set the tablet aside. "Unfortunately, privacy isn't something my family has been afforded in a very long time. And now, whether you want it or not, you're associated with us. That means the media will dig into every aspect of your life. They'll talk to your neighbors, your coworkers, your friends. They'll find every photo, every record, every story they can." Mia pressed closer to Noah's side, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "So what am I supposed to do? Hide? Leave town?" "No." This new voice came from the doorway, and Noah turned to see a man stepping into the room. President Jonathan Rivers was taller than he looked on television, his presence filling the space in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. He wore casual clothes, khakis, and a button-down shirt, but there was no mistaking the authority in the way he carried himself. Noah stood automatically, pulling Mia up with him. "Mr. President?" "Sit, please." Jonathan crossed the room to stand behind his wife's chair, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Mr. Parker, I want to add my gratitude to my wife's. What you did yesterday, there aren't words sufficient to express what it means to me, to our family. Your son is okay. That's all that matters. That matters because of you." Jonathan's eyes, Noah noticed, were red-rimmed like he'd been crying recently. The President of the United States crying. "My wife tells me you have concerns about the media attention." "It's not attention I'm worried about, sir. It's the lies. I've already seen stories that aren't true, speculation about my motivations, people making assumptions about who I am and why I did what I did." Noah took a breath, trying to organize his thoughts. I didn't pull your family from the water for recognition or reward. I did it because they were drowning, and I had the skills to help. That's it. That's the whole story. But now people are trying to make it into something else, something bigger, and I just want to go back to my normal life. I understand that desire. Jonathan's expression was sympathetic but firm. But I'm afraid that's not possible anymore. Whether you like it or not, you're a public figure now. What you do next, how you handle this attention, will define how this story is told. What I do next? Noah felt his temper rising. With respect, Mr. President, I don't plan to do anything next. I plan to go home, close my door, and wait for everyone to forget about this. They won't forget. Elena leaned forward. Noah, please listen. In 2 days, there's going to be a press conference. My husband will be addressing the nation about what happened, about how close we came to tragedy. The media will be there. The world will be watching. And whether you're present or not, they will talk about you. They will define you. Wouldn't you rather be part of that narrative? Wouldn't you rather tell your own story? No, Noah said flatly. I wouldn't, because my story isn't for public consumption. The room fell silent. Mia's hand found his, squeezing tight. President Rivers and the First Lady exchanged a long look, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, Jonathan spoke. I respect your position, Mr. Parker. I do. But I'm going to ask you to reconsider, not for me, and not even for my family, for the country. The country? We live in divided times, cynical times. People have stopped believing in heroes, in selfless acts, in the idea that someone might risk everything for a stranger. Your actions yesterday, that was pure, uncomplicated heroism. No political agenda, no ulterior motive, just one human being saving others because it was the right thing to do. Jonathan's voice gained intensity. America needs that story right now. They need to be reminded that people like you exist, that courage and decency are still alive. Noah wanted to argue, to say that he wasn't a symbol or a story, that he was just a man who did what anyone would have done. But looking at the president's face, at the raw sincerity there, he couldn't find the words. I need to think about it, he finally said. Of course. Jonathan nodded. Take all the time you need. But Noah, understand this. The story is already being told. The only question is whether you want to be part of shaping it. The ride back to Noah's house was silent, except for the hum of the SUV's engine. Mia stared out the window, her hand still clasped in his. When they pulled up to the house, the media presence had somehow grown even larger. News crews from national networks now, not just local stations. We can help with this, Agent Morrison said. Security detail, crowd control. Just say the word. No, thank you. Noah was already opening the door. I just want to be left alone. He and Mia fought their way through the crowd of reporters, ignoring the shouted questions, the microphones thrust in their faces. Inside, with the door locked behind them, Noah leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. Daddy? Mia's voice was small. What are you going to do? I don't know, baby. I honestly don't know. His phone, which he'd turned back on during the ride, buzzed with a text message. Then another. Then a dozen more in rapid succession. He scrolled through them, his unease growing with each one. From his supervisor at the docks, need to talk, call me. From his neighbor 3 houses down. Reporters are asking questions about you, offering money for stories. Some people are talking. From his sister, just saw you on CNN, are you okay? Call me. And then, from a number he didn't recognize, Mr. Parker, this is Thomas Wright from the law firm of Wright & Associates. We'd like to discuss representation. Please call at your earliest convenience. Representation? For what? Noah was about to put the phone down when it rang. His supervisor, Dave. Hey, Dave. Noah, I need you to come by the office tomorrow morning. Dave's voice was tight, professional in a way it had never been before. They'd worked together for 6 years, had beers together after work, talked about their families. This wasn't that Dave talking. This was Boss Dave, the one Noah rarely heard. What's this about? Just come in tomorrow, 8 a.m. Dave, what's going on? A pause, then, we need to discuss your continued employment with the company. That's all I can say right now. The line went dead. Noah stared at the phone, his brain struggling to process what he'd just heard. His employment? What did the rescue have to do with his job? Daddy? Mia was watching him with worried eyes. What's wrong? Nothing, sweetheart. Just work stuff. But it wasn't nothing. Deep in his gut, Noah knew that something had shifted, something fundamental. The world he'd known 24 hours ago, the quiet, predictable world of dock work and school pickups and Sunday dinners with Mrs. Chen, was disappearing, replaced by something he didn't recognize. That night, Noah couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the media camp outside. Generators running, people talking, cars coming and going. At 2 a.m., someone knocked on his door. At 3 a.m., his security lights tripped, probably from a reporter trying to sneak around back for photos. At 4 a.m., he gave up and went downstairs to make coffee. Mrs. Chen found him there an hour later, standing at the kitchen window, watching the sky lighten from black to gray. "You didn't sleep," she said. It wasn't a question. Couldn't. She busied herself making breakfast, her movements efficient and familiar. "You're a good man, Noah Parker. Whatever happens, you remember that. You're a good man who did a good thing." "Then why does it feel like I'm being punished?" Mrs. Chen stopped, turned to face him. "Because the world doesn't know what to do with genuinely good acts anymore. They have to pick at them, find the angle, the hidden motivation. They can't just accept that sometimes people do the right thing simply because it's right." She was probably correct, but that didn't make Noah feel any better. At 7:30 a.m., he got dressed in his work clothes, jeans, steel-toed boots, a company polo shirt, and prepared to face whatever was waiting for him at the docks. Mia was still asleep, and he left her a note saying he'd be back soon, asking Mrs. Chen to check on her. The drive to the docks should have taken 15 minutes. It took 45, because every traffic light seemed to have a reporter stationed at it, recognizing his truck, trying to wave him down. He kept his eyes forward, his jaw clenched, and didn't stop until he pulled into the parking lot at Briar Point Marine Services. Dave was waiting in his office, and he wasn't alone. A woman in an expensive suit sat in the chair across from Dave's desk, a leather portfolio in her lap. Her expression was the kind of carefully neutral that lawyers and funeral directors specialized in. "Noah, come in." Dave gestured to the empty chair. "This is Margaret Chen from our HR department." No relation to Mrs. Chen, Noah assumed. This woman was younger, sharper, her smile professional and cold. "Mr. Parker, thank you for coming in." Margaret opened her portfolio, pulling out a document. "We wanted to discuss the recent media attention surrounding your actions during the storm." "Okay," Noah said slowly. "What about it?" Dave wouldn't meet his eyes. Margaret continued in that same neutral tone. "As you know, Briar Point Marine Services values its reputation in the community. We've built our business on being a trusted, reliable presence at the docks. The recent media circus surrounding your rescue has created complications for the company." Noah's hands clenched on the armrests of his chair. "Complications? We've had reporters on the property, attempting to interview other employees, disrupting operations. Our clients are calling with questions. Some have expressed concern about the attention." "Concern about what? About me saving 2 people from drowning?" "About the disruption to normal business operations." Margaret slid the document across the desk. "We think it's best if you take some time away from the company while the media attention dies down. A leave of absence, fully paid, of course." Noah stared at the document without touching it. "You're suspending me. We're offering you paid leave. You're suspending me because I saved 2 lives. We're trying to protect the company's interests," Margaret said, her tone hardening slightly. "Surely you can understand that." "No." Noah stood abruptly. "No, I really can't understand that. I can't understand how doing the right thing somehow makes me a liability to the company I've worked for 6 years. I can't understand how saving the First Lady and her son is something you need to protect yourselves from." "Noah," Dave started, but Noah cut him off. "How long have we worked together, Dave? How many times have I covered your shifts when your kids were sick? How many times have I stayed late to help finish a job?" "This isn't personal," Dave said quietly. "It's business." "Everything is personal." Noah turned toward the door, then stopped. "You know what? Keep your paid leave. I quit." Noah, wait! But Noah was already walking out, past the shocked receptionist, through the parking lot where two reporters were waiting with cameras. He didn't stop, didn't answer their questions, just got in his truck and drove. He didn't head home. Couldn't face the media circus there. Couldn't face Mia's questions about why he was back so early. Instead, he drove to the beach, to the same stretch of sand where he'd pulled Elena and Matthew from the water 2 days ago. The ocean was calm today, almost gentle, as if apologizing for its previous violence. The beach was empty except for cleanup crews removing debris left by the storm. Noah walked to the water's edge and stood there, hands in his pockets, watching the waves roll in. 2 days ago, his life had made sense. He'd had a job, a routine, a quiet existence that might not have been exciting but was stable and predictable. Now he had no job, no privacy, and no idea what came next. His phone buzzed. Another text from his sister, another call from a reporter, another email from someone wanting something from him. He turned the phone off and threw it as hard as he could into the ocean. It felt good for about 3 seconds, until he realized he'd just thrown away his only way to communicate with Mia in case of emergency. Stupid. Impulsive. The kind of thing the old Noah, the lifeguard Noah who dove off cliffs and took ridiculous risks, would have done. Not the dad Noah who was supposed to be responsible and think things through. "Great job, Parker," he muttered to himself. "Real mature." "Mr. Parker?" Noah spun around to find a young man standing a respectful distance away. He was maybe 30, wearing jeans and a Briar Point Community College sweatshirt, holding a phone but not pointing it at Noah like a weapon the way the reporters did. "I'm not giving interviews," Noah said automatically. "I'm not a reporter." The man took a step closer, and Noah could see now that he looked nervous, his hands shaking slightly. "I'm Sam Morrison. I just wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" "I was on the beach that morning. I saw what you did." Sam's voice cracked. "I saw you run into the water when everyone else was running away. I saw you bring that little boy back to life. And I needed you to know that it mattered. What you did mattered." Noah didn't know what to say. Sam filled the silence. "My little brother drowned when I was 15. We were at a lake, and he went out too far, and I couldn't get to him in time. I've lived with that for 15 years. But watching you yesterday, seeing you save that kid," he wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, "it made me believe that maybe not all drownings end the way my brother's did, that sometimes people get saved. So thank you. Thank you for reminding me that heroes still exist." He turned and walked away before Noah could respond, leaving Noah standing alone on the beach, with tears streaming down his face that he didn't remember starting to cry. He stayed there for another hour, watching the ocean, thinking about Sam's words and the president's words and what Mrs. Chen had said about good acts. When he finally headed back to his truck, the sun was high overhead and the day had warmed considerably. A note was tucked under his windshield wiper. Noah pulled it out, half expecting another reporter's business card or request for an interview. Instead, it was a handwritten message on notebook paper. "You're a good man. Don't let them make you forget that. A grateful neighbor." Then another truck pulled into the parking lot, and Noah recognized it immediately. Tom Rodriguez, the EMT who'd helped him on the beach. Tom got out, walking over with a serious expression. "Heard you quit your job," Tom said without preamble. News traveled fast in small towns. "Yeah, that's bullshit. It is what it is. No, it's not." Tom crossed his arms. "You know what else is bullshit? The stuff people are saying about you." Noah felt his stomach drop. "What stuff?" Tom pulled out his phone, pulled up Facebook, and showed Noah a post from a Briar Point community group. Noah's hands went numb as he read, "Does anyone else think it's convenient that Noah Parker was on the beach at the exact moment the First Lady needed rescuing, and that there just happened to be cameras there to capture it? I'm not saying he staged it, but I'm not saying it either. Seems like someone wanted his 15 minutes of fame, probably going to write a book or sell his story. Single dads have bills to pay, right?" The post had 63 likes and 47 comments, most of them agreeing with the sentiment. Some went even further, suggesting Noah had known who Elena was, that he'd somehow orchestrated the entire rescue for publicity. "That's insane," Noah breathed. "I didn't even know who she was until after." I know that. Anyone with half a brain knows that. But people love conspiracy theories more than they love truth. Tom took his phone back. I tried to defend you in the comments, but it just made more people pile on. I'm sorry, man. This town should be celebrating you, and instead, half of them are tearing you down. Noah leaned against his truck, feeling like the world was tilting. Why? Why would people think that? Because it makes them feel better about themselves. Tom's voice was bitter. If you're just an opportunist chasing fame, then they don't have to feel bad about the fact that they wouldn't have done what you did. They don't have to examine their own courage or lack thereof. It's easier to tear you down than to admit you're a better person than they are. I'm not a better person, I just know how to swim. You know that's bullshit, right? Tom clapped him on the shoulder. You're a hero, Noah. Don't let the bastards convince you otherwise. But as Noah drove home, navigating through the media gauntlet that had become his street, he couldn't shake the feeling that Tom was wrong. He wasn't a hero. Heroes got celebrated, got rewarded, got the girl, and the happy ending. Heroes didn't lose their jobs and get accused of staging rescues for publicity. Heroes didn't feel this alone. Inside the house, he found Mia sitting at the kitchen table with Mrs. Chen, both of them looking at something on Mrs. Chen's iPad. They looked up when he entered, and he could see from their faces that they'd seen the posts, the speculation, the poison that people were spreading about him online. Don't read that garbage, Noah said, taking the iPad and setting it face down on the counter. It's not true, and it's not worth your attention. But people are being mean, Mia said, her voice small. They're saying terrible things about you. People say terrible things when they're scared or jealous or just plain miserable with their own lives. It doesn't make it true. Then why does it hurt so much? Noah pulled out a chair and sat next to his daughter, taking her hands in his. Because we care what people think. Because we want to believe that doing good things will be rewarded, and when that doesn't happen, it feels like the whole world is broken. Is it? Broken? Noah thought about the last 48 hours. About the president asking him to be part of something bigger. About losing his job. About Sam on the beach and the grateful note on his windshield and the poison on social media. About Elena's tears and Matthew's first breath after he'd been pulled back from death. No, he said finally. It's not broken. It's just complicated, and sometimes doing the right thing makes your life harder instead of easier. But that doesn't mean it wasn't worth doing. Mia studied his face for a long moment, then threw her arms around his neck and held on tight. I'm proud of you, Daddy. Noah closed his eyes and held his daughter, and for just a moment, that was enough. That night, after Mia had gone to bed, Noah sat in his living room with all the lights off, watching the glow of the media camp through his windows. His phone, the new one he'd had to buy to replace the one he'd thrown in the ocean, buzzed with another call from President Rivers' office. He'd been ignoring their calls all day, but now, sitting in the dark, thinking about everything that had happened, he found himself answering. Mr. Parker. The voice was crisp, professional. This is Jennifer Morrison, White House Communications. Thank you for taking my call. The president would like to extend an invitation for you to attend the press conference tomorrow. He believes your presence would mean a great deal to the American people. Noah let out a long breath. What if I don't want to mean something to the American people? What if I just want my life back? I understand that desire, Mr. Parker, but I think you already know that particular ship has sailed. Her tone softened slightly. The president also wanted me to tell you that he's aware of what's being said about you online and in the media. He finds it reprehensible, and he intends to address it directly at the press conference, with or without you there. He doesn't need to defend me. Actually, he does. Because when people attack you, they're attacking the idea that selfless heroism still exists, and that's something the president, something all of us, need to fight against. A pause. Will you come, Mr. Parker? Will you let us tell your story the way it deserves to be told? Noah thought about Mia, about the pride in her eyes when she'd said she was glad he came back. He thought about Sam on the beach and the note under his windshield and the 63 people who thought he'd staged a rescue for publicity. He thought about Elena's tears and Matthew's first breath and the weight of the president's hand on his shoulder. He thought about what he wanted his daughter to learn from all this. Yes, he heard himself say, I'll be there. The morning of the press conference arrived with a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. as if the universe was determined to provide the perfect backdrop for what was about to unfold. Noah stood in front of his bathroom mirror at 5:30 a.m., trying to knot a tie he'd borrowed from his late father-in-law's closet. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. "You look nice, Daddy." Mia appeared in the doorway, already dressed in the navy blue dress Mrs. Chen had helped her pick out the day before. She looked older somehow, more grown up than she had any right to be at 12 going on 13. "You look beautiful, baby girl." Noah gave up on the tie and let it hang loose around his neck. "You sure you want to come? You can stay with Mrs. Chen if this is too much." "I want to be there." Mia's voice was firm, certain in a way that reminded him painfully of Sarah. "You shouldn't have to do this alone." The Secret Service had arrived at 4 a.m. to sweep the house and establish a security perimeter. Now at 6, Agent Morrison knocked softly on the doorframe. "Mr. Parker, we should leave in 30 minutes if we want to arrive on schedule." On schedule. As if this was just another appointment, another ordinary day, instead of Noah Parker from Briar Point about to stand in front of the world's media alongside the President of the United States. Mrs. Chen had made breakfast, but Noah couldn't eat more than a few bites. His stomach felt like it was trying to twist itself into knots. He kept thinking about the Facebook posts, the speculation, the 63 people who thought he was a fraud. What if he got up there and froze? What if he said something stupid? What if he made everything worse? "Stop thinking so hard," Mrs. Chen said, pressing a travel mug of coffee into his hands. "You're a good man who did a good thing. That's all you need to remember. The rest is just noise." The rest is just noise. Noah clung to that thought as they climbed into the waiting SUV, as they drove through streets where people had already started gathering with signs and cameras, as Mia's small hand found his and held tight. The press conference was being held at Briar Point's Community Center, the largest venue in town that could accommodate the massive media presence. The building had been transformed overnight. Security checkpoints, camera platforms, a temporary stage with presidential seals and American flags. It looked like something from a movie, not like the place where Noah had attended PTA meetings and Mia's school concerts. Agent Morrison led them through a back entrance, away from the reporters already assembling in the main hall. They were taken to a small room that had probably been used for storage before being hastily converted into a green room. President Rivers was there, along with Elena and Matthew, all three of them dressed in what Noah had come to think of as official family attire. Coordinated but not matching, expensive but not showy. Matthew saw Noah first. The boy's face lit up with recognition, and he tugged on his mother's hand. "Mama, that's him! That's the man who saved us!" Elena smiled, her eyes bright with emotion. "Yes, sweetheart, that's Mr. Parker." Matthew broke free from his mother's grip and ran straight to Noah, wrapping his small arms around Noah's legs with surprising strength. "Thank you for saving my mama. Thank you for saving me." Noah's throat closed up. He crouched down to Matthew's level, this little boy whose life he'd breathed back into on a storm-torn beach. "You're very welcome, buddy. I'm glad you're okay." "I don't remember the water," Matthew said seriously, "but Mama says you pulled me out and made me breathe again. She says you're a hero." "I'm just a guy who knows how to swim." "Duh, that's what heroes say in the movies." Matthew's gap-toothed grin was infectious. "They always say they're not heroes, but they are." President Rivers approached, offering his hand. Noah stood and shook it, hyper-aware of Mia hovering close behind him, peeking around his shoulder at the first family with wide eyes. "Mr. Parker, thank you for coming." Jonathan's grip was firm, his gaze direct. "I know this isn't easy for you. I want you to know that what we're about to do out there, it's not just about my family. It's about making sure your sacrifice is honored properly, and that the people who've been spreading lies about you understand the truth." "I appreciate that, sir. I just hope I don't mess this up." "You won't." Elena stepped forward, and Noah noticed she was holding a small wooden box. "Before we go out there, I wanted to give you something private, just between us." She opened the box to reveal a medal. Not military, not official, just a simple bronze circle on a blue ribbon with an inscription Noah couldn't read from where he stood. "This belonged to my grandfather," Elena said softly. "He was a firefighter in New York. He saved 6 people from a burning building in 1967 and never talked about it for the rest of his life. He said heroism wasn't something you displayed. It was something you carried quietly in your heart. She took the medal from the box and held it out to Noah. I think he would have wanted you to have this. One quiet hero to another. Noah's hands trembled as he accepted the medal. The inscription read, "For courage when it mattered most." I can't take this. It's a family heirloom. You're part of our family's story now, Elena said, and we're part of yours, whether either of us planned it that way or not. Please, take it. Noah closed his fingers around the medal, feeling its weight, its history. Thank you. This means more than you know. Daddy? Mia tugged on his sleeve. Can I see? Noah showed her the medal, and she traced the inscription with one finger, her expression solemn. Courage when it mattered most, she read aloud. That's you, Daddy. A staff member appeared in the doorway. Mr. President, we're ready when you are. Jonathan nodded, then turned to Noah. I'm going to speak first. Set the context, address the speculation, make it clear what actually happened. Then I'm going to introduce you. You don't have to say much, just a few words about why you did what you did. Can you do that? Noah thought about all the prepared speeches he'd imagined over the last 2 days, all the perfect words he'd tried to string together in his head. None of them felt right. None of them captured the simple truth of what had happened on that beach. I'll figure something out, he said. They were led through a corridor toward the main hall, and Noah could hear the rumble of voices, the anticipation of hundreds of reporters waiting for the story to begin. Mia squeezed his hand so tight his fingers went numb. You've got this, she whispered. Just tell them the truth. The truth. That sounded so simple. But what was the truth? That he'd seen people drowning and responded on instinct? That he'd been terrified every second he was in that water? That he'd thought about Mia the entire time, about how she couldn't lose another parent? That pulling Matthew from the water and feeling that first breath had been the most profound moment of his life since watching his daughter being born? How do you reduce something that enormous, that significant, to a few words at a podium? They reached the stage entrance, and Noah could see through the gap in the curtains. The crowd was massive. Every major news network, dozens of local stations, photographers lining the walls, reporters in their assigned seats with notebooks and recorders ready. At the back of the room, Noah spotted faces he recognized from Briar Point. Tom Rodriguez was there. Mrs. Chen had somehow made it past security, and there, near the middle, was Dave from the docks, his expression unreadable. Mr. President, you're on, the staff member said. Jonathan Rivers walked onto that stage like he'd been born to it, his smile confident, his wave practiced. The crowd erupted in camera flashes and shouted questions that he ignored with the ease of long practice. He reached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and waited for the room to settle. Noah watched from the wings, his heart hammering so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. Good morning, Jonathan began, his voice filling the space with presidential authority. 3 days ago, my family and I experienced every parent's worst nightmare. My wife and son were caught in a storm surge while walking on the beach. They were pulled into the ocean, into water that should have killed them. And they would have died, if not for one man's extraordinary courage. The room was absolutely silent now, every reporter leaning forward, every camera focused on the president's face. That man didn't know who my wife was. He didn't know he was saving the First Lady of the United States and the president's son. He just knew that 2 people were drowning and he had the skills to help. So he ran into water that professional rescue swimmers later told me was unsurvivable. He fought through hurricane-force waves and riptides that would have killed most people. He kept my family alive through strength and determination and sheer refusal to give up. And then, when my son had stopped breathing, when any hope seemed lost, he brought him back to life. Jonathan's voice caught slightly on those last words, and Noah saw him grip the podium tighter, collecting himself. In the days since this incident, I've watched with growing dismay as some members of the public and media have questioned this man's motives. They've suggested he somehow staged this rescue for attention or financial gain. They've implied that his heroism was calculated rather than genuine. And I'm here today to tell you, unequivocally and without reservation, that those suggestions are not just wrong. They're an insult to everything this country should stand for. The president's tone had gone from warm to hard, his words cutting through the room like a blade. Noah Parker is a 40-year-old dock worker and single father who lost his wife to cancer 3 years ago. He's a former lifeguard who stopped doing rescue work to care for his daughter full-time. He volunteers at his local food bank. He coaches Little League. He's the kind of quiet, decent person who makes communities work, who helps neighbors without expecting thanks, who does the right thing simply because it's right. Jonathan paused, letting his words sink in. And when the moment came, when every instinct probably told him to stay safe on shore with his daughter, he made the choice to risk everything for strangers. That's not opportunism. That's not calculation. That's heroism in its purest form. Noah felt Mia lean against his side, her head resting against his arm. Elena stood on his other side, Matthew in her arms, all of them watching the president defend a man he'd met only days ago. "I've been in politics long enough to understand cynicism," Jonathan continued. "I understand why people look for hidden motives, why they struggle to believe in genuinely selfless acts. We've been disappointed too many times. We've seen too many heroes revealed as frauds. But sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, a hero is just a hero. Sometimes courage is just courage. And when we refuse to acknowledge that, when we tear down the people who represent the best of what we can be, we diminish ourselves and our society." He gripped the podium with both hands now, leaning forward slightly, his voice dropping but somehow carrying even more weight. "So let me be absolutely clear. Noah Parker saved my family's lives. He asked for nothing in return. He didn't seek publicity or reward. In fact, he's been reluctant to even be here today because he doesn't see himself as special or extraordinary. He just sees himself as a man who did what needed doing." Jonathan's voice softened. "But I see him differently. I see him as a reminder that heroes walk among us, often unrecognized, always humble. I see him as proof that in our darkest moments, there are people willing to step forward and be the light." The president straightened, his expression shifting from intensity to warmth. "Which is why I'm proud to announce the creation of the Parker Foundation for Civilian Heroes. This foundation will recognize and support ordinary Americans who perform extraordinary acts of courage. It will provide financial assistance to families affected by rescue attempts, fund training programs for civilian first responders, and ensure that when people like Noah Parker risk everything to save others, they aren't left to face the consequences alone." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Noah felt his breath catch. A foundation? Named after him? "Mr. Parker will serve as the honorary chairman of this foundation, if he chooses to accept," Jonathan continued. "But more importantly, his actions will serve as the foundation's guiding principle, that everyday courage deserves recognition, that selfless heroism still exists, and that we as a nation should celebrate and support the people who embody those values." The president turned toward the wings, his hand extended in invitation. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce the man who saved my family, who reminded America what heroism looks like. Please welcome Noah Parker." The applause started instantly, building to something that felt like thunder. Noah stood frozen in the wings, his feet refusing to move, his mind blank with panic. This was too much, too big. He was just a dock worker from Briar Point. He wasn't equipped for this. "Go on, Daddy," Mia whispered, giving him a gentle push. "They're waiting for you." Noah looked down at his daughter, at the pride and love in her eyes, and something inside him steadied. He wasn't doing this for the cameras, or the applause, or even for the president. He was doing this because Mia was watching, and he needed her to see that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about being terrified and moving forward anyway. He walked onto that stage on legs that felt like water, into applause that seemed to physically push against him. The lights were blinding. The cameras were everywhere. But then he reached the podium and looked out at the crowd, and instead of seeing reporters and cameras, he saw people. Tom Rodriguez giving him a thumbs up, Mrs. Chen wiping tears from her eyes. And there, standing at the back of the room, was Dave from the docks, applauding with everyone else. President Rivers shook his hand, pulling him into a brief embrace that the cameras captured from a dozen angles. "You've got this," Jonathan whispered. "Just speak from the heart." Then the president stepped aside, and Noah was alone at the podium with a microphone and hundreds of expectant faces waiting for him to say something profound. He cleared his throat. The sound echoed through the speakers, too loud, making him wince. Someone in the crowd chuckled sympathetically. I'm not really good at speeches, Noah began, his voice shaking slightly. I'm better at loading cargo and fixing dock equipment. So if this is awkward, I apologize in advance. More chuckles. Warmer this time. Noah took a breath and continued. 3 days ago, I was having coffee on my porch when I heard the emergency sirens. I'm a former lifeguard, so that sound, it still gets to me. It still makes me want to respond, even though I haven't worked a beach in years. He paused, gathering his thoughts. My daughter Mia asked me not to go. She was scared I wouldn't come back. And she had every right to be scared, because she already lost one parent, and here I was, about to run into a hurricane. He could see Mia at the edge of the stage, Elena's hand on her shoulder, both of them watching him intently. But I went anyway. And the reason I went has nothing to do with heroism or courage or any of the things the president so generously attributed to me. I went because I heard those sirens and I knew someone needed help, and I had skills that might make a difference. That's it. That's the whole calculation. Noah leaned on the podium, trying to make eye contact with as many people as possible. I didn't know I was saving the First Lady. I didn't know the little boy I pulled from the water was the president's son. All I knew was that a mother was drowning and her child was drowning, and if I didn't do something, they would die. His voice gained strength as he spoke, the words coming easier now. People have asked me in the last few days why I risked my life for strangers, why I would leave my daughter potentially alone in the world for people I didn't know. And honestly, I've asked myself the same question. He looked directly at the cameras now, at the millions of people who would watch this later. The answer I keep coming back to is this: because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. Because I want my daughter to grow up knowing that when someone needs help, you help them. You don't calculate the risks or weigh the costs or worry about what people will think. You just help, because that's what decent people do. The room was absolutely silent. Noah could hear his own breathing through the microphone. The president mentioned that some people have questioned my motives, that they think I somehow staged this rescue or did it for publicity. Noah's jaw tightened. Those accusations hurt. They hurt because they suggest that basic human decency is so rare that it must have an ulterior motive. They hurt because they teach my daughter that no good deed goes unpunished, that trying to help others will just make you a target. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But you know what hurts more? The idea that we've become a society where we can't believe in selfless acts anymore, where we're so cynical, so suspicious, that we have to tear down anyone who does something good. He thought about the Facebook posts, the speculation, the poison that had been spread about him online. I'm not a perfect person. I'm not even an especially good person. I lose my temper sometimes. I feed my daughter too much pizza and not enough vegetables. I forget to return library books, and I drive too fast, and I curse when I stub my toe. A few people in the crowd laughed, but when I saw 2 people drowning, I didn't think about any of that. I just thought about getting them to safety, and I'd do it again, 1,000 times over, regardless of who they were or what it cost me. Noah's hands gripped the podium edge, his knuckles white. The president has done me an incredible honor by creating this foundation and putting my name on it. I'm grateful and humbled and honestly a little overwhelmed. But if this foundation is going to mean anything, it can't just be about recognizing heroes. It has to be about creating a culture where heroism is possible, where people feel empowered to help each other instead of pulling out their phones to record tragedy, where doing the right thing is celebrated instead of questioned. He looked over at Jonathan, at Elena, and Matthew, at his daughter standing proud at the stage edge. 3 days ago, I pulled 2 people from the ocean. Today, the president pulled me from obscurity and put me on a national stage. Neither of us asked for the other's help, but we both needed it. And I think there's a lesson in that. Noah's voice softened. We're all drowning sometimes. We're all caught in currents we can't fight alone. And the measure of our society isn't how we treat the powerful or the famous. It's how we treat each other when we're struggling. It's whether we dive into the water to help or whether we stand on shore and watch people drown. He stepped back from the podium, uncertain if he was finished or if he should say more. President Rivers appeared at his side, clasping his shoulder. Ladies and gentlemen, Noah Parker. Jonathan's voice was thick with emotion. A genuine American hero. The applause this time was deafening. People stood, the ovation spreading through the room like a wave. Noah stood there, overwhelmed, until Mia ran onto the stage and crashed into him, her arms wrapping around his waist. He held his daughter while cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, and President Rivers stood beside them, applauding along with everyone else. This was the moment, Noah thought. This was the moment that would define how the story was told. Not the rescue itself, but this, standing on a stage with his daughter, being recognized for doing what any decent person should do. The press conference continued for another 20 minutes. Reporters asked questions which Jonathan fielded with practiced ease. Noah stood to the side with Mia and the first family, watching it all unfold like he was outside his own body. "You did good," Elena whispered to him. "You told the truth, and you made people listen. That's all anyone can do." When it was finally over, when the reporters had been ushered out and the cameras turned off, Noah found himself in a quiet corner with just his daughter and Mrs. Chen, who had somehow talked her way backstage. "I'm so proud of you," Mrs. Chen said, pulling him into a fierce hug that smelled like lavender and home. "Your wife would be so proud." The mention of Sarah made Noah's chest tight. He'd been so focused on surviving the last 3 days that he hadn't had time to think about what she would have made of all this. Sarah had always been the brave one, the one who faced cancer with grace and humor, even when it was killing her. She would have known exactly what to say up there, would have handled the spotlight with ease. "I wish she was here," Noah admitted quietly. "She is," Mrs. Chen said firmly, tapping his chest over his heart. "Right here, always." They were preparing to leave when Dave appeared, looking uncomfortable in his one good suit. He approached slowly, like he wasn't sure he'd be welcome. "Noah, He stopped, seeming to struggle with what to say. "I need to apologize. What we did, letting you go like that, it was wrong. I let corporate pressure and fear dictate my actions instead of standing up for someone who'd been a good employee and a good friend for years." Noah studied the man who'd been his supervisor and his friend, who'd sat with him in the hospital when Sarah was dying, who'd taught Mia how to tie nautical knots on slow days at the dock. "You fired me to protect the company's reputation," Noah said quietly, "because having me around was inconvenient. I know, and I'm ashamed of that." Dave met his eyes. "The company wants you back, with a raise, and a public apology, and anything else we can do to make this right." "What changed?" Noah asked, though he already knew the answer. "You became famous. You became someone it's good to be associated with instead of someone to avoid." Dave's jaw tightened. "And that makes me feel even worse, because it means we were only ever concerned with optics, not with doing right by you." Noah thought about it for a long moment. The old Noah, the one from 4 days ago, would have been grateful for the job back, would have accepted the apology and returned to work and pretended nothing had happened. But that Noah didn't exist anymore. "I appreciate the offer," Noah said finally, "but I think I'm going to pass. I need to figure out what comes next for me and Mia, and I don't think it involves going back to loading cargo for people who only value me when I'm useful to them." Dave nodded slowly, accepting the rejection with more grace than Noah expected. "I understand, and for what it's worth, you deserve better than we gave you." He extended his hand. "Good luck, Noah. I mean that." They shook hands and Dave walked away, leaving Noah with the strange feeling of having closed a door on his old life without quite knowing what door was opening ahead of him. The Secret Service drove them home as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The media presence outside Noah's house had somehow grown even larger, but this time the tone was different. Instead of aggressive reporters shouting questions, there were people with signs. "Thank you, Noah Parker. Heroes still live here. Briar Point's finest." Agent Morrison cleared a path through the crowd, and Noah and Mia made it inside to find their house transformed. Flowers covered every surface. Cards and letters were stacked in boxes by the door. The answering machine blinked with 147 messages. "Oh my," Mrs. Chen breathed, taking in the scene. "This is going to take some time to sort through." Noah picked up a card at random and read it aloud. "Dear Mr. Parker, I'm a single mother of 3. Last year, my oldest son nearly drowned in our community pool. A stranger pulled him out and saved his life, then disappeared before I could thank him. Watching you at the press conference today reminded me that there are still good people in the world. Thank you for being one of them. Thank you for showing my children that heroes are real." He set the card down, his hands shaking. There were hundreds more. Thousands, maybe. "Daddy?" Mia picked up another envelope, this one addressed in careful child's handwriting. "Can I read this one?" Noah nodded, not trusting his voice. Mia opened the envelope and pulled out a drawing, a stick figure pulling two other stick figures from blue crayon waves. At the top, in wobbly letters, "You are my hero." It was signed by Emma, age 7, from Ohio. "She drew you saving them," Mia said softly, tracing the crayon lines with one finger. "She drew you being brave." Noah sat down heavily on his couch, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. This wasn't just about him anymore. It wasn't even about Elena and Matthew. It was about what his actions represented to people. Proof that courage still existed, that people still helped each other, that the world wasn't as broken as it sometimes seemed. "I don't know if I can live up to this," he admitted. "All these people looking at me like I'm some kind of symbol. What if I let them down?" "You won't," Mia said with absolute certainty, sitting beside him. "Because you're not trying to be a symbol. You're just trying to be yourself. And yourself is pretty great." Mrs. Chen appeared with tea, her solution to everything. "The girl is right. You're just Noah. Same as you were last week, same as you'll be next week. The only difference is now more people know it." They spent the evening sorting through letters and cards, reading stories from strangers whose lives had been touched by rescue workers, firefighters, everyday heroes who'd stepped up when needed. By the time Mia went to bed, Noah's perspective had shifted slightly. Maybe this wasn't about him at all. Maybe it was about giving people a reason to believe in good things again. He was washing dishes when his phone rang. The new one that didn't have his old contacts but somehow had been found by everyone who needed to reach him. He almost didn't answer, exhausted from the day's emotional roller coaster, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Parker, this is Thomas Wright from Wright & Associates. We spoke earlier about representation." "I'm not interested in a lawyer, Mr. Wright. Actually, I'm calling about something else. I represent the Parker Foundation, the one President Rivers announced today. We need to discuss your role as honorary chairman." Noah sank into a kitchen chair. "I thought that was just ceremonial." "It can be, if you want it to be, or it can be something more substantial. The president has allocated significant funding for the foundation, and there's already been an outpouring of private donations. We're talking about a real organization that could make a genuine difference in recognizing and supporting civilian heroes." Thomas paused. "But it needs someone at the helm who understands what heroism actually looks like. Someone who's lived it." "I'm a dock worker, Mr. Wright. I don't know anything about running a foundation." "You know about courage. You know about making impossible choices. You know what it feels like to risk everything for people you don't know." Thomas's voice was warm, persuasive. "The rest we can teach you. What we can't teach is authenticity, and that's what this foundation needs." Noah thought about the letters stacked in his living room, about Emma's crayon drawing, about Sam on the beach saying his brother's drowning didn't have to be the end of every drowning story. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course. Take all the time you need." "But Noah, may I call you Noah? I hope you'll seriously consider it. The world needs this foundation, and the foundation needs you." After they hung up, Noah sat in his kitchen for a long time, listening to the house settle around him. The media camp outside had finally quieted, reporters packing up for the night or settling in for the long haul. Somewhere in the darkness, his old life was disappearing, being replaced by something he didn't quite recognize yet. He pulled out the medal Elena had given him, the one that had belonged to her grandfather. For courage when it mattered most. He turned it over in his hands, feeling its weight, wondering if he was brave enough for what came next. His phone buzzed with a text message from Elena. "Thank you for today. You reminded a lot of people that decency still exists. Sleep well, hero." Noah almost laughed at that. Hero. The word felt too big, too significant for someone who'd just done what needed doing. But maybe that was the point. Maybe heroism wasn't about being special or extraordinary. Maybe it was just about showing up when people needed you, about doing the hard thing because it was the right thing, about refusing to stand on shore while others drowned. He thought about Mia upstairs, asleep in her room, growing up in a world that desperately needed to believe good people still existed. He thought about Matthew taking his first breath after being pulled from death. He thought about Sarah, who'd faced cancer with more courage than he'd ever shown in his life. And he thought about the foundation, about the possibility of honoring people like Sarah, like the stranger who taught him to swim when he was 6, like the firefighters and EMTs and ordinary citizens who risked everything without expecting recognition. By the time Noah finally climbed the stairs to bed, he'd made his decision. He didn't know if it was the right one, didn't know if he was capable of what they were asking, but he knew he had to try. Because courage, he was learning, wasn't about being certain. It was about being terrified and moving forward anyway. Just like diving into hurricane-force water to save 2 drowning people. Just like standing on a stage in front of the world's media and telling the truth. Just like accepting that your quiet life was over and something bigger, something scarier, was beginning. Noah Parker might not have been a hero 4 days ago. But maybe, with time and effort and help from people who believed in him, he could become one. Or maybe he already was, and just needed to learn to accept it. The morning after the press conference, Noah woke to find his yard transformed into something resembling a memorial. Overnight, people had left not just flowers, but tokens of gratitude that spoke to the depth of what his actions had meant to strangers across the country. Teddy bears lined his fence. Handwritten signs thanked him in a dozen languages. Someone had left a lifeguard's whistle hanging from his mailbox with a note that read, "From one guardian to another." He stood at his window with coffee cooling in his hands, watching as more people arrived. Not reporters this time, but ordinary citizens who wanted to be near the place where the hero lived. A woman in her 60s placed a framed photograph by his gate. Noah couldn't see the image from this distance, but he could see her lips moving in what looked like a prayer. A man in a military uniform saluted the house before driving away. "It's like a pilgrimage," Mrs. Chen observed, appearing at his elbow with her own cup of tea. She'd let herself in through the back door again, a habit Noah had long since stopped questioning. "They need to believe in something good. You gave them that. I gave them a rescue. They're turning it into something else entirely. Same thing, different perspectives." Mrs. Chen sipped her tea thoughtfully. "Your wife understood this, you know. When she was sick, people would stop her at the grocery store, at Mia's school, just to tell her how brave she was. She always said she was just living her life, doing what needed doing, but to them, she was courage personified. She was proof that you could face the impossible with grace." Noah's throat tightened at the mention of Sarah. She hated the attention. Did she? Or did she hate that cancer made her a public spectacle when all she wanted was to be Mia's mom and your wife? Mrs. Chen turned to face him fully. There's a difference between unwanted attention and unasked for responsibility. Sarah rose to meet hers. "Now you have to decide if you'll rise to meet yours." Before Noah could respond, his phone rang. Thomas Wright, the foundation lawyer, calling at 7:30 in the morning. "I know it's early," Thomas said when Noah answered, "but I wanted to catch you before your day got away from you. Have you thought about my proposal?" Noah glanced at Mia's closed bedroom door, then at the growing crowd outside his window. "I'm considering it, but I need to understand what it actually means. What would I be responsible for?" Initially, guidance and vision. We have board members who can handle the administrative and legal aspects. What we need from you is the heart of the foundation, helping identify who deserves recognition, sharing your perspective on what civilian heroism looks like, being the face of the organization. Thomas paused. "And yes, before you ask, there would be public appearances, speaking engagements, media interviews. I know that's not appealing to you, but it's part of the package." "How much time are we talking about?" "That's negotiable. This doesn't have to consume your life, Noah. You're not giving up being a father or having a private existence. You're just agreeing to use your experience to help others." Thomas's voice softened. "Think about it this way. What if someone had started a foundation in your wife's name while she was fighting cancer? What if that foundation helped other families navigate the impossible choices and financial burdens that come with serious illness? Wouldn't you have wanted that to exist?" The question hit Noah squarely in the chest. During Sarah's illness, they'd nearly lost everything. Their savings evaporated by medical bills. Their home almost foreclosed on when Noah had to cut his hours to care for her. If someone had stepped in, if there had been support beyond the pity of neighbors and the inadequate help of insurance companies, maybe Sarah's last months could have been about living instead of just surviving. Yes, Noah admitted. I would have wanted that. Then give that to others. Give people who've sacrificed everything to help strangers the support they deserve. Make sure the next Noah Parker doesn't lose his job and face public suspicion for doing the right thing. Thomas let that sink in. The foundation can't change what happened to you, but it can change what happens to others like you. I need to talk to my daughter first. She's been through enough upheaval lately. Of course, take the time you need. But Noah, the world is watching right now. The momentum from yesterday's press conference won't last forever. If we're going to make this foundation meaningful, we need to move while people still care. After hanging up, Noah made pancakes, his mind churning through possibilities and concerns. Mia emerged around 8, still in her pajamas, her hair a tangled mess that reminded him painfully of Sarah's morning look. There are more people outside, she observed, peering through the curtains. Do you think they'll ever go away? Eventually, people's attention spans are short. Noah flipped a pancake with more force than necessary. But before they do, I need to talk to you about something. They sat at the kitchen table, the pancakes between them going cold as Noah explained about the foundation, about Thomas Wright's call, about the choice he was facing. Mia listened with that serious expression she wore when processing important information, the one that made her look far older than her almost 13 years. Would you be gone a lot? She asked when he finished. I don't know yet. Probably some, but not like a regular job, more like occasional trips, some speaking events. Noah reached across the table to take her hand. I wouldn't do this if it meant abandoning you, baby. You're my priority. You're always my priority. I know that. Mia squeezed his fingers. But Daddy, you can't not do this because you're worried about me. Mom wouldn't want that. She always said that hiding from life because you're scared isn't really living. Noah felt his eyes sting. When did you get so wise? I've had good teachers. Mia smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Mom taught me to be brave even when I'm scared. You taught me that helping people is more important than staying safe. So how can I tell you not to do something that would help people just because it might be hard or scary? You're 12. You're allowed to be selfish and want your dad to stay home. I'm almost 13, Mia corrected with the indignation of someone on the cusp of teenage years. And I do want you home. But I also want to be proud of you, and I can't be proud if you're making choices based on fear instead of what's right. Noah pulled his daughter into a hug, this remarkable young person who somehow contained pieces of both him and Sarah while being entirely her own person. When did you grow up? I think it happened when you jumped into a hurricane, Mia murmured against his chest. I watched you almost die, and I realized that life doesn't wait for us to be ready. Sometimes you just have to do the thing that scares you and hope you're strong enough to handle it. They spent the rest of the morning sorting through the offerings in the yard, reading cards, organizing flowers. The teddy bear collection alone could have supplied a daycare. Noah found himself moved by the personal nature of many gifts. A firefighter's badge with a note about a life saved 20 years ago. A lifeguard's rescue tube signed by an entire beach patrol unit. A child's drawing of Noah with a cape and the words, "Real heroes don't need superpowers." Around noon, a black SUV pulled up, and Noah recognized Agent Morrison emerging from the driver's seat. She navigated through the crowd with practiced ease, eventually reaching Noah's porch, where he'd been cataloging donations. Mr. Parker, the First Lady would like to see you. She asked if you and your daughter could come to the residence this afternoon. Is everything okay? Is Matthew all right? Everyone's fine. Mrs. Rivers would just like to speak with you privately. Agent Morrison's expression softened slightly. Between you and me, I think she wants to thank you away from the cameras and political machinery. Just one person to another. Noah glanced back into the house where Mia was organizing cards by state of origin, creating a map of gratitude that stretched across the entire country. Give me 30 minutes to get ready. The drive to the estate took them along the coastal road, and Noah found himself staring out at the ocean that had nearly killed him in the first family just days ago. It looked deceptively peaceful today, sunlight dancing across gentle waves that bore no resemblance to the monster that had tried to swallow Elena and Matthew. Does it bother you? Agent Morrison asked, noticing his gaze. Being near the water after what happened? No. Should it? Many rescue workers develop anxiety around the element that nearly killed them. Water, fire, heights. The brain remembers danger and tries to protect us from repeating it. Noah considered this. I'm not afraid of the ocean. Never have been. I respect it, understand its power, but I don't fear it. The water wasn't trying to kill anyone that day. It was just being itself. We were the ones in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's a remarkably mature perspective. It's a lifeguard's perspective. The ocean isn't good or evil, it just is. Respecting that keeps you alive. At the estate, they were led not to the formal sitting room where Noah had met with Elena before, but to a sunroom overlooking the cliffs and the sea beyond. Elena was there with Matthew, both of them engaged in what appeared to be an intense game of Go Fish. They looked up when Noah and Mia entered, and Matthew's face split into a huge grin. You came! The boy abandoned his cards and ran to Noah, wrapping his arms around Noah's legs in a hug that had become his signature greeting. Mama said you might be too busy, but I knew you'd come. Of course I came. How could I say no to hanging out with my favorite 7-year-old? I'm your only 7-year-old, Matthew pointed out with the logic unique to children, which automatically makes you my favorite. Noah ruffled the boy's dark hair, noticing how much healthier he looked compared to the blue-lipped child he'd pulled from the water. How are you feeling, buddy? Good. The doctors say I'm all better. No water in my lungs anymore. Matthew said this with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather, apparently unaware of how close he'd come to death. Want to play Go Fish with us? Mama's winning, but I think she's cheating. I am not cheating, Elena protested, but her eyes sparkled with amusement. I'm just very good at remembering which cards have been played. That sounds like cheating with extra steps, Mia observed, and Matthew laughed with delight at finding an ally. They played several rounds of Go Fish, the conversation easy and natural in a way that probably looked bizarre to the Secret Service agents stationed discreetly around the room. The First Lady of the United States, her son, and a dock worker's family playing cards and laughing about nothing in particular. If someone had told Noah a week ago this would be his life, he would have suggested they seek professional help. Eventually, Matthew's nanny appeared to take him for his afternoon reading time, and Mia volunteered to help, leaving Noah and Elena alone in the sunroom with tea that had gone cold and a pile of discarded playing cards. Thank you for coming, Elena said, her tone shifting from playful mother to something more serious. I know you didn't have to, and I'm grateful. You're the First Lady. When you call, people generally come. You're not most people, though. You've made it clear you're not interested in the trappings of association with my family. Elena smiled. No. Which is exactly why I value your presence. You're here because you want to be, not because you're hoping to gain something from the connection. She stood and moved to the windows overlooking the ocean. Noah joined her, both of them silent for a moment, watching the waves. I've been thinking about that morning, Elena said quietly, about how close we came to not making it. Matthew doesn't really remember, which I suppose is a blessing, but I remember everything, the cold, the power of the water, the absolute certainty that we were going to die. She turned to look at Noah. And then suddenly, you were there, this presence in the chaos, pulling us back from the edge. I genuinely thought you were a hallucination at first, my brain conjuring a savior because the alternative was too terrible to accept. You were incredibly brave, Noah said, keeping Matthew above water, never letting go even when you were exhausted. That saved his life as much as anything I did. We saved him together. Elena's eyes were bright with unshed tears, which is what I wanted to talk to you about. Not the foundation, not the press conference, not any of the public aspects of what happened. I wanted to tell you, privately, what it means to me that my son is alive. What it means that I get to watch him grow up, see him learn to read and ride bikes, and become whoever he's meant to be. You gave me that, Noah. You gave me my future. Noah didn't know what to say. The magnitude of that gift, a child's entire life, all the moments and possibilities and years stretching ahead, felt too immense to adequately acknowledge. I have something for you, Elena continued, pulling a small envelope from her pocket. Open it when you get home, not now. It's nothing official, nothing public. Just a letter I wrote trying to express what you mean to my family. I don't know if words can capture it, but I needed to try. Noah took the envelope, feeling its weight. Thank you. For everything. For not letting the media turn this into a circus, for defending me at the press conference, for treating me like a person instead of a political opportunity. You saved my child's life. The least I could do is treat you with the basic decency you deserve. Elena's smile was warm but tired. Though I should warn you, the political opportunities are coming whether we want them or not. There are people in Washington who want to use you as a symbol, as proof that America still produces heroes. They'll invite you to speak at rallies, ask you to endorse candidates, try to attach your story to their agendas. I'm not interested in politics. I know, which is why I'm warning you now. Say no early and often. Don't let them pressure you into becoming something you're not. Elena's expression turned serious. The foundation is different. That's about helping people, not advancing political careers. But everything else, the speaking invitations, the request to appear at fundraisers, the endless attempts to monetize your story, you can and should refuse those. Your story belongs to you, Noah. Don't let anyone take that away. They talked for another hour, the conversation ranging from the practical aspects of managing sudden fame to the more philosophical questions about heroism and responsibility. Elena shared stories from her own experience living in the public eye, offering advice on protecting Mia from the worst aspects of media attention. Children of famous people grow up under a microscope, Elena said. Matthew has security and protocols and an entire system designed to give him as normal a childhood as possible. Mia doesn't have that infrastructure, but she still deserves privacy and normalcy. Don't let the media make her an extension of your story. Let her be her own person. She already is, Noah said with a smile. Sometimes I think she's the only thing keeping me sane through all this. Children have a way of cutting through the noise to what matters. Matthew told me yesterday that he doesn't care if you're famous or if people think you're a hero. He just cares that you're nice, and you let him win at Go Fish sometimes. I don't let him win. The kid's actually good at cards, Elena laughed. He gets that from his father. Jonathan can't play poker to save his life, but put a deck of regular cards in his hands, and he's unbeatable. On the drive home, Mia was unusually quiet, staring out the window with a thoughtful expression Noah had learned meant she was processing something important. What's on your mind, baby girl? Matthew's really lucky, Mia said. Not because his dad is president or because they have a huge house, but because he gets to grow up not really remembering the worst day of his life. He doesn't have to carry around the memory of almost dying. Noah glanced at his daughter, understanding suddenly that they weren't just talking about Matthew. You remember your mom being sick? Every day. Mia's voice was small. I remember her in the hospital, how thin she got, how her hair fell out. I remember the smell of the medicines and the sound of the machines. Sometimes I wish I could forget, just have the good memories without all the hard ones. Noah's chest felt tight. They'd talked about Sarah's death many times, worked through grief with the help of a therapist Mrs. Chen had insisted they see. But this was different. This was Mia articulating a pain Noah hadn't fully recognized. I'm sorry you have to carry that, he said quietly. I'd take it from you if I could. I know, but maybe that's not the right way to think about it. Mia turned from the window to face him. Mom used to say that the hard memories make us appreciate the good ones more. That if everything was easy, we'd never really understand what we have. Maybe remembering the bad stuff is what makes me grateful for the good stuff. Your mother was a wise woman. She learned from you, she said, that you taught her to find meaning in difficult things, to see challenges as opportunities for growth. Mia smiled. She told me once that she fell in love with you because you dove into a riptide to save a tourist who'd ignored the warning flags. She said most people would have called for help and waited for professionals, but you just went, and she knew right then that you were someone who didn't wait for permission to do the right thing. Noah's vision blurred. He'd forgotten about that rescue, one of dozens he'd performed during his lifeguard years. But Sarah had been on the beach that day, a college student on spring break, and apparently that moment had mattered more than he'd realized. I didn't know she was watching, he admitted. She was always watching, and she was always proud. Mia reached across the seat to squeeze his hand. I think she'd be really proud of what you're doing now. The foundation, standing up to people who doubted you, showing me that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being scared and doing the thing anyway. They spent the rest of the drive in companionable silence, each lost in memories of Sarah and thoughts about the future. When they arrived home, the crowd had thinned slightly, but there were still offerings being added to the growing memorial in their yard. Inside, Noah opened Elena's letter, while Mia organized their collection of cards from well-wishers. The First Lady's handwriting was elegant but personal, and her words hit Noah with unexpected force. Dear Noah, I've started this letter a dozen times, trying to find words adequate to express what you've given my family. Each attempt falls short because language isn't built to contain gratitude this profound. How do you thank someone for your child's life? For your own life? For every future moment that now exists because of choices made in seconds? You've probably heard thank you 1,000 times in the past few days. From me, from Jonathan, from strangers who see you as a symbol of something larger than one rescue. But I wanted you to hear it once more, quietly, in a moment away from cameras and politics and the weight of public expectation. Thank you for Matthew's first day of school, which will happen because you pulled him from the water. Thank you for his graduation, his wedding, his children, all the moments that exist now because you refused to let him drown. Thank you for giving me the chance to watch my son grow up, to be his mother for all the years ahead instead of just the 7 years behind. Thank you for reminding me that heroism isn't extinct, that courage still lives in unexpected places, that ordinary people can perform extraordinary acts without expecting reward or recognition. But most of all, thank you for being exactly who you are, a good man who saw people in trouble and helped them. That simple act of decency in a world that often feels short on decency has meant more than you can possibly know. You'll always be part of our family's story, Noah Parker, and I hope, in some small way, we've become part of yours. With gratitude beyond measure, Elena. Noah folded the letter carefully, his hands shaking slightly. This was real, not the media circus or the foundation or the strangers leaving offerings in his yard. This, a mother's gratitude for her child's life, this was what mattered. That evening, Thomas Wright called again. Noah answered on the first ring. I'll do it, Noah said before Thomas could launch into whatever prepared speech he'd crafted. I'll chair the foundation. I'll do the speaking engagements and the interviews and whatever else needs doing, but on my terms. The foundation helps people who sacrifice for others, not just the ones who make headlines. And my daughter comes first, always. If there's ever a conflict between foundation work and being her father, she wins. Agreed. Thomas sounded relieved and energized. We'll draft formal agreements, but I want you to know the board is thrilled. We've already received over $2 million in donations since the press conference. People want to support this vision. $2 million? Noah felt dizzy. That's just the beginning. Conservative estimates suggest we could raise 10 times that in the first year. The country is hungry for something to believe in, Noah. You're giving them that. After hanging up, Noah found Mia in her room, working on homework with the television on low in the background. The news was showing footage from the press conference, Noah's face filling the screen as he spoke about decency and helping strangers. I took the foundation job, he told her. Mia looked up from her math homework, studying his face. Good. You would have regretted saying no. Probably. But it means changes for us. More travel, more attention, less privacy. We'll figure it out. Mia turned back to her homework with the casual confidence of youth. We always do. The next morning, Noah woke to find his yard had been cleared overnight. The Secret Service, working with local volunteers, had collected all the offerings, photographed everything, and organized it for the foundation's archives. In place of the chaotic memorial was a single bronze plaque mounted on a post at the edge of his property. Here lives Noah Parker, who reminds us that heroes walk among us. It felt presumptuous and humbling all at once. Noah stood in his pajamas, coffee in hand, staring at the plaque while Mrs. Chen appeared at his elbow. The town council approved it last night, she explained. Emergency session. They're also renaming the harbor. Renaming it what? Parker Point Harbor, in honor of your rescue and in recognition of your service to the community. Mrs. Chen sipped her tea. Dave from the docks led the initiative, actually, said it was the least the town could do after how they treated you. Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry. A week ago, he'd been a nobody dock worker whose greatest accomplishment was loading cargo efficiently. Now the harbor bore his name. "It's too much," he said. "It's exactly right," Mrs. Chen corrected. "You saved the First Lady and her son. You stood up for decency when everyone else was tearing you down. You're using your platform to help others. If that doesn't deserve recognition, what does?" The official renaming ceremony happened 3 days later, attended by what felt like the entire town. The mayor gave a speech. Tom Rodriguez spoke about Noah's character. Even Dave got up and publicly apologized for how the dock company had treated their former employee. But the moment that broke, Noah, was when Mia took the microphone, unscheduled and unplanned, and spoke to the crowd. "Everyone keeps calling my dad a hero," she said, her young voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "And he is. But not because he saved the First Lady. He was a hero before that, and he'll be a hero after everyone forgets about the rescue. He's a hero because he teaches me that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard. He's a hero because he loved my mom through cancer and held her hand when she died and still manages to smile every day, even though I know he's sad. He's a hero because he makes pancakes on Sundays and helps with my homework and tells me I can be anything I want to be." Mia paused, wiping her eyes, and Noah's vision blurred with tears. "So yes, rename the harbor, build statues, give him awards. But remember that the truest heroism is the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't make headlines but makes the world a little bit better. My dad is that kind of hero. He always has been." The crowd erupted in applause. Noah pulled his daughter into a hug while cameras flashed and the newly renamed Parker Point Harbor sparkled in the afternoon sun behind them. That night, after the ceremony, after the celebrations, after the last well-wisher had gone home, Noah sat on his porch watching the ocean and thinking about everything that had changed in just over a week. His phone buzzed with a text from President Rivers. "Watched your daughter's speech. She's remarkable. You've raised her well. The country is lucky to have both of you reminding us what truly matters." Noah typed a response. "Thank you for everything, for believing in me when others didn't, for defending me, for giving me the chance to turn this into something meaningful." The president's reply came quickly. "You did that yourself, Noah. I just gave you the platform, the courage, the grace, the decency. That was all you." As Noah sat there in the darkness, listening to the ocean and thinking about impossible rescues and unexpected futures, he realized something profound. He'd spent 3 years since Sarah's death just trying to survive, just trying to be a good father to Mia, just trying to get through each day without falling apart. He'd thought of himself as someone whose best days were behind him, whose heroic lifeguard phase had ended when responsibility and grief replaced youth and invincibility. But maybe that had been wrong. Maybe his most heroic days weren't in the past. Maybe they were right now, in choosing to use his second chance at purpose to help others, in showing Mia that tragedy could be transformed into meaning, and proving that ordinary people could still do extraordinary things. The ocean whispered against the shore, the same ocean that had nearly killed him and the people he'd saved. But Noah wasn't afraid. He'd never been afraid of the water, only of letting fear stop him from living fully. And he was done letting fear make his choices. Whatever came next, the foundation work, the public appearances, the responsibility of carrying other people's hope, he would face it the same way he'd faced that storm-tossed ocean, with courage, with determination, and with the knowledge that sometimes the scariest things lead to the most meaningful outcomes. His daughter was asleep inside, dreaming whatever dreams almost 13-year-olds dreamed. The first family was safe in their secure residence. Matthew probably also asleep, his future stretching ahead of him in ways that wouldn't have been possible without that desperate rescue. And somewhere across the country, people were reading about Noah's story and maybe, just maybe, finding the courage to be heroes in their own lives. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 6 months passed like water through cupped hands. Impossible to hold on to, impossible to slow down, each day bleeding into the next until Noah barely recognized the life he was living. The Parker Foundation had grown from an idea announced at a press conference into something real and tangible, with offices in Washington, D.C., a staff of 12, and a mission that resonated across the country. Noah found himself spending 2 weeks out of every month traveling, speaking at events, meeting with potential donors, and most importantly, identifying the quiet heroes the foundation existed to honor. But despite the chaos of his new life, despite the speaking engagements and board meetings and constant requests for his time, Noah had kept his promise. Mia came first, always. He was home for her 13th birthday party, helping Mrs. Chen hang streamers in their living room, while Mia's friends arrived with gifts and the kind of excited energy that only teenagers could generate. He was there for her school concerts, sitting in the audience while she played violin with the concentration she'd inherited from Sarah. He coached her soccer team on weekends when he wasn't traveling, and when he was away, he called every night to hear about her day, her homework, her dramas with friends. The media attention had faded somewhat, as media attention always did when the next crisis or scandal emerged to capture the public's imagination. There were still occasional reporters who wanted to do follow-up stories, still people who recognized Noah in airports and restaurants. But the fever pitch of those first weeks had cooled into something more manageable, more sustainable. Noah was in his new foundation office, a modest space above a coffee shop in Briar Point, because he'd refused to relocate to D.C. permanently, when Thomas Wright called with news that made his hands go cold. "The foundation's been nominated for the Presidential Citizens Medal," Thomas said, his voice vibrating with excitement. "And Noah, they're not just honoring the foundation, they're specifically recognizing you. The ceremony is in 3 weeks. The president wants to present it personally." Noah sat down heavily in his desk chair, staring out the window at Parker Point Harbor, where fishing boats bobbed peacefully in the morning light. The Presidential Citizens Medal, that's one of the highest civilian honors in the country. It recognizes individuals who've performed exemplary deeds of service. Your rescue of the first family, combined with the foundation work, made you an obvious candidate. Thomas paused. "I know you don't like the spotlight, but Noah, this is important. It's validation for everything the foundation stands for." "When's the ceremony?" 3 weeks from Friday, at the White House. Black tie event, media coverage, the whole production. Thomas's voice gentled. "Bring Mia. Bring Mrs. Chen if you want. Make it a family affair." After hanging up, Noah sat in silence for a long time, processing what this meant. 6 months ago, he'd been a dock worker whose biggest concern was making sure Mia got to school on time and remembering to pay the electric bill. Now he was being honored at the White House for heroism and service. Sarah would have laughed at the absurdity of it all. She would have made some joke about Noah finally getting the recognition he deserved for putting up with her terrible cooking all those years. She would have bought a new dress for the ceremony and spent hours helping Mia pick out something appropriate, and made the whole thing feel less terrifying through the sheer force of her humor and grace. But Sarah wasn't here, and Noah had to navigate this alone. Except he wasn't alone. He had Mia, who'd grown 6 inches and gained a confidence that sometimes left him breathless. He had Mrs. Chen, who'd appointed herself the family's unofficial manager and chief supporter. He had the foundation staff, who'd become something like friends. And he had the memory of Sarah, guiding him even in her absence, reminding him through Mia's expressions and gestures that courage came in many forms. That evening, Noah broke the news over dinner, homemade lasagna that Mia had helped prepare, using Sarah's recipe that they'd finally felt ready to attempt. "The White House?" Mia's eyes went wide. "Like the actual White House? Where the president lives?" "That's the one." "And they're giving you a medal?" "Technically, it's recognizing the foundation's work. But yes, there's a medal involved." Mia set down her fork, her expression turning serious in that way that meant she was processing something important. "Mom would have been so proud." "She would have thought it was ridiculous," Noah countered gently. "Your mother never liked fancy ceremonies or formal events." "No, but she liked when good things happened to good people. And you're the best person I know, Daddy." Mia's voice was thick with emotion. "You saved people's lives and then used that to help other people who save lives. That's not ridiculous. That's exactly what a hero should do." Mrs. Chen, who'd been quietly eating her lasagna, spoke up. "The girl is right. Sarah would have been proud. Maybe uncomfortable at the fancy party, but proud of the man you've become." "I haven't become anyone different. I'm still just me." "That's what makes it meaningful," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "You didn't let fame change you. You didn't let recognition make you arrogant. You just kept being Noah Parker, decent man from Briar Point, who helps people because that's what decent people do. That's the real accomplishment. The 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Noah had to be fitted for a tuxedo, which felt absurdly formal for someone who lived in jeans and flannel shirts. Mia got a new dress, midnight blue with silver accents that made her look heartbreakingly grown up. Mrs. Chen insisted she was fine in something from her closet, but Noah took her shopping anyway and bought her an elegant pantsuit that made her tear up in the dressing room. "I'm just the neighbor," she protested. "You don't need to spend money on me." "Your family," Noah corrected. "You've been family since Sarah died, maybe even before. And family gets nice clothes for White House ceremonies." The foundation threw a small celebration the week before the trip, with the staff presenting Noah with a framed collage of photos from their first 6 months of operation. Images of the people they'd honored: a firefighter who'd run into a burning building 7 times to save residents, a teacher who'd used her body to shield students during a school shooting, a homeless veteran who'd pulled a child from a frozen lake. Each face represented a story of courage, of sacrifice, of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. "You built this," Thomas said, his hand on Noah's shoulder as they studied the collage. "6 months ago, this was just an idea. Now we've recognized 43 civilian heroes, provided financial support to 17 families facing hardship because of their heroic actions, and inspired thousands of people to submit nominations for others they believe deserve recognition. That's your legacy, Noah." "It's our legacy," Noah corrected. "I'm just the face. You're the one making it function." "Maybe. But faces matter. Symbols matter. You gave people something to believe in, and that belief is changing lives." The flight to Washington, D.C. was Noah's first time on a private plane. The foundation had offered to cover commercial tickets, but President Rivers had insisted on sending a plane, saying it was the least he could do. Mia spent the entire flight with her face pressed to the window, watching clouds and landscapes scroll by beneath them. Mrs. Chen knitted calmly, her needles clicking in a rhythm that Noah found oddly soothing. They landed at a private airfield where a car was waiting to take them to their hotel. Not just any hotel, but the historic Willard Intercontinental, where apparently every president since Franklin Pierce had stayed at some point. Their suite overlooked Pennsylvania Avenue, and Mia immediately started planning how early they'd need to wake up to watch the city come alive. "This is surreal," Noah said, standing at the window in his undershirt and dress pants, his bow tie hanging loose around his neck. The ceremony was in 2 hours, and he'd been standing here for 20 minutes, trying to make his hands stop shaking enough to tie the damn thing. "Let me." Mrs. Chen appeared at his elbow, taking the bow tie with practiced efficiency. "I used to tie these for my husband before his business dinners. The trick is confidence and proper tension." She worked quickly, her fingers deft despite her age, and within seconds, Noah's bow tie was perfect. "How do you know how to do everything?" he asked. "I've lived 82 years, Noah. You learn things." She patted his chest, smoothing the fabric. "Your wife would be proud, not of the medal or the recognition, but of who you've remained through all of this. That's the real achievement." Mia emerged from the bedroom in her midnight blue dress, her hair swept up in a style that made her look far older than 13. Noah's breath caught. "Baby, you look beautiful." "I look like a kid playing dress-up," Mia said, but she was smiling. "Do you think Matthew will be there at the ceremony?" "Probably. The whole first family usually attends these things." "Good. I want him to see that we clean up nice." Mia checked her reflection one more time, then turned to face Noah with an expression of surprising maturity. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified." "Good. Mom always said that if you're not scared, you're not doing anything important." Mia crossed the room and took his hand. "Let's go do something important, Daddy." The White House was exactly as imposing as Noah had imagined. All white columns and manicured lawns and security that made the Secret Service details he'd grown accustomed to look casual by comparison. They were escorted through corridors lined with portraits of former presidents, past rooms where history had been made, to the East Room where the ceremony would take place. The room was already filling with people, politicians and military brass and civilians who'd been selected for various honors. Noah recognized a few faces from the foundation's work, heroes they'd honored in the past 6 months who'd been invited to attend. Seeing them here, dressed in their finest, reminded Noah why all of this mattered. These were the people the foundation existed to celebrate. "Noah!" Matthew's voice cut through the formal atmosphere, and suddenly the 7-year-old was running toward him with the enthusiasm only children could muster at state events. "You came! Mama said you were getting a medal too!" "Hey, buddy." Noah crouched down to Matthew's level, accepting the enthusiastic hug. "Look at you in your fancy suit. Very presidential." "I have to wear it for ceremonies. It's uncomfortable, but Mama says that's part of being in the first family." Matthew pulled back, studying Noah seriously. "Are you nervous?" "When I got an award at school, I was so nervous I forgot my speech." "I'm definitely nervous, but I figure if I mess up, at least I'll do it in spectacular fashion." Matthew giggled. "That's what Daddy says, too. He says if you're going to fail, fail big." Elena appeared then, elegant in a navy dress that probably cost more than Noah's truck, but her smile was warm and genuine. "Noah, you look wonderful. And Mia, that dress is absolutely perfect on you." "Thank you, Mrs. Rivers." Mia's voice was shy but steady. "Your home is beautiful." "It's the people's home, really. We're just living in it temporarily." Elena's eyes found Noah's. "Could I speak with you privately for just a moment, before the ceremony starts?" They stepped into a smaller anteroom, leaving Mia with Mrs. Chen and Matthew with his nanny. Elena closed the door behind them, her expression shifting from formal First Lady to something more personal. "I wanted to thank you again," she said, "not just for the rescue, though God knows I'll never stop being grateful for that, but for what you've done since. The foundation, the work you're doing to recognize civilian heroes. It matters, Noah. It matters more than you probably realize. I'm just trying to honor what you and the president started." "No, you're doing something more than that. You're changing the narrative about what heroism looks like in America. You're showing people that courage isn't just for soldiers and first responders. It's for anyone willing to step forward when others step back." Elena's voice grew intense. "The country needed that message, still needs it, and you're delivering it not through political speeches or policy positions, but through simple acts of recognition and support." "It's what Sarah would have wanted," Noah said quietly. She always believed in celebrating the people who made the world better in small, quiet ways. "Then this medal today, it's for her too. For the woman who raised you and Mia to understand what truly matters." They returned to the East Room just as the ceremony was beginning. Noah took his seat in the front row, Mia on one side and Mrs. Chen on the other, while President Rivers took the podium and began speaking about the importance of civilian service, about the heroes who walked among them unrecognized, about the duty of a nation to honor those who sacrifice for others. "Today, we recognize individuals who represent the best of American courage and service," Jonathan said, his voice carrying the weight of presidential authority. "These are not people who sought recognition. They're not people who acted for reward or acclaim. They're simply people who saw a need and met it, who saw danger and faced it, who saw others suffering and helped them." One by one, recipients were called forward. A postal worker who'd performed CPR on a heart attack victim. A group of teenagers who'd pulled a family from a burning car. A nurse who'd worked double shifts for 6 months during the pandemic, sacrificing her own health to care for others. Each story was remarkable. Each person was humble in their acceptance. And then President Rivers called Noah's name. Noah Parker needs no introduction to anyone following the news 6 months ago. His rescue of my wife and son during a hurricane was captured on camera and broadcast around the world. But what many people don't know is what Noah has done since that moment. He's built a foundation that has recognized and supported dozens of civilian heroes, providing financial assistance to families affected by heroic actions, funding training programs for first responders, and most importantly, reminding America that heroism is not dead. It's all around us, waiting to be acknowledged. Noah stood on shaking legs and made his way to the podium. The president shook his hand, then pulled him into a brief embrace. "Thank you," Jonathan whispered, "for everything." The medal was heavier than Noah expected, solid and real in his hands as the president placed it around his neck. The room erupted in applause, but Noah barely heard it. He was thinking about Sarah, about the life they'd built together, and the life he was building without her. He was thinking about Mia, sitting in the front row with tears streaming down her face and pride shining in her eyes. He was thinking about the scared little boy he'd pulled from the ocean, now sitting safely beside his mother, alive and whole and full of possibility. Thank you, Mr. President, Noah managed when the applause died down enough for him to speak. He turned to face the audience, the medal heavy against his chest. 6 months ago, I was a dock worker who happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right skills. I didn't think of myself as a hero. I still don't, honestly. But I've learned something through this experience, through the foundation, through meeting the remarkable people we've honored. He paused, gathering his thoughts, aware that this moment was being broadcast, that millions of people were watching, that his words would be analyzed and quoted and dissected. Heroism isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and acting anyway. It's not about seeking recognition. It's about doing what needs doing because it's right. And it's not rare or special. It's happening all around us, every day, performed by ordinary people who simply refuse to walk past suffering or danger without trying to help. Noah's voice grew stronger. The foundation exists because those people deserve recognition. Not because recognition makes them heroes, but because recognizing them might inspire others to act when their moment comes, to choose courage over comfort, to choose service over safety, to choose to be the person who dives into the water instead of the person who stands on shore watching others drown. He looked directly at Mia, this remarkable young woman who'd lost her mother and survived her father's transformation into a public figure and still managed to be kind and brave and wise beyond her years. My daughter told me once that real heroism is the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't make headlines but makes the world better. She was right. The truest heroes are the ones you never hear about. The parents working 3 jobs to support their families, the teachers spending their own money on classroom supplies, the neighbors who check on the elderly during storms, the strangers who stop to help someone change a flat tire. Noah's throat felt tight. The foundation can't honor everyone who deserves it. We can't even come close, but we can try to change the culture. We can try to build a society where helping others is celebrated instead of questioned, where courage is recognized instead of dismissed, where decency is the norm rather than the exception. The room was absolutely silent now, everyone leaning forward, hanging on his words. This medal is an incredible honor, but it's not mine alone. It belongs to my late wife, Sarah, who taught me that grace in the face of impossible odds is its own form of heroism. It belongs to my daughter, Mia, who reminds me every day what truly matters. It belongs to Elena and Matthew, who survived something that should have killed them and then used that survival to build something meaningful. It belongs to every person the foundation has honored, and every person we haven't had the chance to honor yet, and every person who performs quiet acts of courage that no one ever sees. Noah's hand found the medal hanging from his neck, feeling its weight, its significance. 6 months ago, I pulled 2 people from the ocean. Today, I stand here because of what happened next, because they chose to transform that moment into something bigger than one rescue. They chose to build a foundation that would help others, that would recognize heroism in all its forms, that would remind America of its better nature. He looked at President Rivers, at Elena sitting in the audience with her arm around Matthew. So thank you, Mr. President, for this honor. Thank you, Elena, for your grace and support. Thank you to everyone who's contributed to the foundation, everyone who's nominated someone for recognition, everyone who's chosen to be a hero in their own small way. He stepped back from the podium, the applause washing over him like a wave, and returned to his seat where Mia immediately grabbed his hand and held tight. The ceremony continued with other honorees, but Noah barely registered it. He was too busy processing what had just happened, what the last 6 months had meant. How drastically his life had changed from that moment on the storm-torn beach when he'd chosen to run toward danger instead of away from it. After the ceremony, there was a reception with canapes and champagne and the kind of small talk that Noah had never been good at. But he did his best, speaking with other honorees, thanking donors who'd supported the foundation, accepting congratulations from people who wanted to shake his hand and take selfies with him. Matthew found him eventually, dragging Noah away from a conversation with a senator to show him the Lincoln bedroom. It's my favorite room in the whole house, Matthew explained as they walked, his small hand in Noah's. President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation here. Miss Jenkins, my teacher, says it's one of the most important things any president ever did. Miss Jenkins is right. They stood in the historic room, surrounded by period furniture and the weight of history, and Matthew turned to look up at Noah with serious eyes. I've been having dreams, Matthew said quietly, about the water, about being cold and scared and not being able to breathe. Noah's heart clenched. He crouched down to Matthew's level. That must be scary. It is. But Mama says it's normal to dream about scary things that happened. She says it's my brain trying to process what happened and make sense of it. Matthew twisted his fingers together. Do you have bad dreams about saving us? Sometimes, Noah admitted. Sometimes I dream that I don't make it in time, that I'm not strong enough or fast enough, and I can't reach you. But you did reach us. You saved us. I did. And the bad dreams can't change that. They're just our brains being overly cautious, trying to prepare us for danger that's already passed. Noah put his hands on Matthew's small shoulders. But buddy, if the dreams get too scary, you need to talk to someone. A therapist, your parents, someone who can help you work through them. I talked to Dr. Martinez. She's helping. Matthew smiled then, the shadow lifting. She says I'm resilient. That means I'm strong even when things are hard. You're incredibly resilient. You survived something most adults couldn't survive. Because you saved me. We saved you together. Your mom kept you above water until I could get to you. You held on even when you were scared. I just provided the swimming part. Matthew studied Noah's face for a long moment, then threw his arms around Noah's neck in a fierce hug. I'm glad you were at the beach that day. I'm glad you decided to help us. Me too, buddy. Me too. They returned to the reception to find Mia deep in conversation with Elena about violin music and school and the challenges of growing up in the public eye. Mrs. Chen had been cornered by a group of foundation donors who were apparently fascinated by her perspective as Noah's neighbor and friend. President Rivers was moving through the room, working it with the ease of someone born to politics. But when he saw Noah, he excused himself and came over. That was a hell of a speech, Jonathan said quietly. You have a gift for cutting through the noise to what matters. I just said what I was thinking. That's the gift. Most people can't do that, especially under pressure. Jonathan glanced around the room, then lowered his voice. I wanted to tell you, there's been some talk about you running for office, local level, maybe state. People think you'd be good at it. Noah laughed. I'm a dock worker who got lucky one time. I'm not politician material. Neither was I once. I was a small-town lawyer who cared about civil rights and somehow ended up here. Jonathan's expression was serious. I'm not saying you should do it. I'm just saying the option exists if you ever want it. The foundation is doing important work, but imagine what you could accomplish with actual legislative power behind you. I appreciate the thought, Mr. President, but I think I'm more useful doing what I'm doing now, highlighting heroes, not trying to be one. You don't have to try. You already are. Jonathan clapped Noah on the shoulder. But I respect your decision. The foundation needs you more than politics does anyway. The reception wound down eventually, guests trickling away until only the Parker family and the First family remained, sitting in a small parlor with the formality finally dropped. Matthew had fallen asleep with his head on Elena's lap. Mia was showing the president photos on her phone from her school soccer season. Mrs. Chen was in conversation with one of Elena's advisors about Chinese pottery, of all things. Noah found himself standing by a window, looking out at the White House grounds, lit up against the night sky, trying to reconcile the surreal nature of his current reality with the simple life he'd lived just 6 months ago. Overwhelming, isn't it? Elena had appeared beside him, careful not to disturb the sleeping Matthew. Being here, being part of this world. It took me years to stop feeling like an imposter. Do you still feel that way sometimes? Every day. She smiled. But I've learned that feeling like an imposter just means you understand the weight of what you're doing. The people who never feel that way are the ones you have to worry about. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the night. The foundation is going to keep growing, Elena said eventually. The work you're doing is resonating with people in ways that surprised even Jonathan. You're giving them something to believe in. That's a lot of pressure. It is, but you're handling it with grace. More importantly, you're handling it without losing yourself. That's rare, Noah. Most people who get thrust into the spotlight either become obsessed with fame or crushed by the pressure. You've just kept being yourself. A good father, a decent man, someone who helps people because that's what decent people do. I have good people around me. Mia keeps me grounded. Mrs. Chen keeps me humble. The foundation staff keeps me focused. Noah turned to look at Elena. And you and the president gave me a platform to turn one moment of action into something that matters. I'm grateful for that. We're grateful you were on that beach, not just because you saved us, though God knows we'll never stop being grateful for that, but because the man you are, the person you've proven yourself to be, that's exactly who this country needed to see right now. The drive back to the hotel felt like returning from a dream. Mia dozed against Noah's shoulder while Mrs. Chen knitted in comfortable silence. The city lights blurred past the windows, and Noah found himself thinking about the medal in its presentation box, about the weight of what it represented, about the responsibility that came with recognition. Back at the hotel, after Mia had gone to bed and Mrs. Chen had retired to her room, Noah stood on the balcony overlooking Pennsylvania Avenue, his phone in his hand, scrolling through messages. Hundreds of them, from people he knew and strangers alike, congratulating him on the medal, thanking him for the foundation, sharing their own stories of everyday heroism. One message stood out, from Sam Morrison, the man who'd approached him on the beach months ago, the one whose brother had drowned. Watched the ceremony tonight. You said something about changing the culture, about building a society where helping others is the norm. I want you to know you're succeeding. Since our conversation on the beach, I've volunteered with the local water rescue team. I've learned CPR. I've made it my mission to be someone who could save a life if the moment comes. You inspired that. Thank you for reminding me that my brother's death doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of me making sure other brothers don't drown. Noah read the message 3 times, his eyes blurring with tears. This was it. This was what mattered. Not the medal or the recognition or the fancy ceremony at the White House. This, one person choosing courage, choosing to be ready to help, choosing to transform grief into purpose. He thought about Sarah, about how she'd lived her final months with grace and humor despite the pain. How she'd made Noah promise not to let grief stop him from living fully, from taking risks, from being the kind of father Mia deserved. He'd tried to honor that promise, but he'd also hidden behind it, using fatherhood as an excuse to avoid risks, to play it safe, to never fully engage with life again. Until the storm, until 2 people drowning, until the choice between safety and courage. And now here he was, 6 months later, standing on a hotel balcony in Washington, D.C., wearing a Presidential Citizen's Medal, running a foundation that was changing lives, being the kind of man Sarah had always believed he could be. I hope you're proud, he whispered into the night, not entirely sure if he was talking to Sarah or to some larger force in the universe. I hope wherever you are, you can see what we've built, what Mia's becoming, what your love and belief made possible. The wind carried his words away into the city noise, but Noah felt a sense of peace settle over him like a blanket. He'd spent 3 years grieving, and he'd probably spend the rest of his life missing Sarah. But grief didn't have to mean the end of living. Loss didn't have to mean the end of growth. He'd learned that in the ocean, pulling 2 strangers back from death. He'd learned it in the aftermath, watching his daughter grow stronger and more confident. He'd learned it in the foundation work, meeting people who'd transformed their own tragedies into purpose. And he was still learning it, every day, one small choice at a time. The next morning, they flew back to Briar Point, back to the life Noah had built in the wake of disaster. But something had shifted. Maybe it was the medal, or the ceremony, or Jonathan's words about having a gift for cutting through noise. Maybe it was Sam's message about choosing to be ready to help. Or maybe it was simply that Noah had finally accepted that his life had changed irrevocably, and hiding from that change wasn't going to serve anyone. At the foundation office the following Monday, Noah called a staff meeting. Thomas and the 11 other employees gathered around the conference table, coffee cups in hand, curious about what their chairman wanted to discuss. I've been thinking, Noah began, standing at the head of the table with the kind of nervous energy he usually tried to suppress, about what we're doing and why we're doing it. The foundation has been successful beyond anything I imagined. We've honored some amazing people, provided real support to families in need, started conversations about civilian heroism, but I think we can do more. More how? Thomas asked, leaning forward with interest. I want us to create training programs, free CPR classes in underserved communities, water safety courses, first aid certification, not just recognizing heroes after the fact, but creating more potential heroes by giving people skills they might need. Noah's words came faster as the idea took shape. And I want to establish a rapid response fund for families of people who've performed rescues or heroic acts, so that if someone loses their job because they took time off to save a life, or if they're injured during a rescue attempt, or if they face any kind of hardship because of their heroic actions, we can step in immediately. Not with a medal and a press conference months later, but with practical support right when they need it most. The staff was silent for a moment, processing. Then Thomas started nodding, slowly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. "That's brilliant," he said. "It transforms us from a recognition organization into something more comprehensive. We're not just celebrating heroism after the fact, we're actively creating conditions for more heroism to happen." Exactly. Noah felt the rightness of it in his bones. Sarah used to say that the best way to honor someone is to embody the values they represented. We honor heroes by creating more heroes. We recognize courage by teaching courage. The meeting lasted 3 hours as they sketched out plans, discussed funding, debated logistics. By the end, they had the outline of an expansion that would triple the foundation's budget and scope. It was ambitious. It was risky. It was exactly what they needed to do. Noah left the office as the sun was setting, driving home through streets he'd known his entire life, but which felt somehow different now. Parker Point Harbor glinted in the fading light, fishing boats returning from a day at sea. The bronze plaque at the edge of his property caught the sun, announcing to anyone who cared that a hero lived here. Mia was in the kitchen when he arrived, working on homework while something that smelled suspiciously like burning garlic filled the air. "I'm trying to make dinner," she explained, waving smoke away from a pan on the stove. "It's not going great." Noah laughed and gently moved her aside, rescuing what turned out to be an attempt at pasta carbonara. "What made you decide to cook?" "I was thinking about Mom, about how she always made dinner even when she was tired from treatment, how she said cooking for people was an act of love." Mia's voice was thoughtful. "I wanted to try loving you the way she did." Noah pulled his daughter into a hug, holding her tight while the pasta water boiled over and the smoke alarm threatened to go off. "You love me exactly right, baby girl, just by being you." They salvaged dinner together, working side by side in the kitchen the way he and Sarah used to, and Noah taught Mia the tricks Sarah had taught him: how to tell when pasta was done, how much salt to add to the water, how to make a sauce that didn't separate. It was ordinary and profound all at once, this passing down of knowledge, this continuation of Sarah's presence through the small rituals of daily life. Over dinner, which turned out surprisingly edible despite the rocky start, Noah told Mia about the Foundation's expansion plans. She listened with the same serious attention she'd given his medal ceremony, asking thoughtful questions about logistics and funding. "So you'd be teaching people how to save lives," she said when he finished explaining. "Not just recognizing people who've already done it." "Right. Creating more potential heroes instead of just celebrating existing ones." "Mom would love that." Mia smiled. She always said the best memorial to someone is living out their values. Teaching people to save lives, that's living out what you believe in. That night, Noah sat on his porch with a beer and his phone, finally allowing himself to read through all the messages that had accumulated since the White House ceremony. Most were congratulations and well wishes, but scattered among them were stories, people sharing their own experiences with heroism, both performing and receiving it. A woman whose husband had died saving neighbors from a fire, grateful that the Foundation was recognizing people like him. A teenager who'd pulled a friend from a car accident and was dealing with PTSD from the experience, asking if the Foundation could help with therapy costs. An elderly man who'd performed CPR on a stranger 50 years ago and never told anyone, wondering if it was too late to share his story. Noah responded to each one personally, spending hours typing on his phone while the ocean whispered in the distance. He promised the widow that they'd honor her husband's memory. He arranged for the teenager to receive therapy funding. He assured the elderly man that heroism never had an expiration date and encouraged him to share his story for the Foundation's archives. By the time he finally went to bed, it was past midnight, but Noah felt a sense of purpose that went beyond medals and ceremonies. This was the real work, the individual connections, the personal impact, the steady accumulation of small acts that added up to something meaningful. The Foundation's expansion launched 2 months later with a press conference that attracted significantly less attention than the White House ceremony, but felt more substantial in its implications. Noah stood at a podium in Briar Point Community Center, the same building where the original press conference had been held, and announced free CPR classes beginning the following week, water safety courses launching that summer, and a rapid response fund that would provide immediate financial support to heroes and their families. "We're not just recognizing heroism anymore," Noah told the assembled reporters and community members. "We're actively creating conditions for more heroism to happen. Because courage isn't innate, it's teachable. Skills can be learned. Confidence can be built. And when people know they have the training and support to help others, they're more likely to act when the moment comes." The first CPR class filled up within hours of registration opening. By the end of the week, they had a waiting list of over 300 people. The water safety courses, taught by retired lifeguards and Coast Guard personnel, attracted families from across the region. And the Rapid Response Fund received its first application within days from a woman who'd been injured rescuing a child from an abusive situation and couldn't work while recovering. The foundation approved her request immediately, covering her lost wages and medical expenses. When Noah called to tell her the news, she wept with relief. "I thought I was going to lose my apartment," she said through tears. "I thought doing the right thing was going to cost me everything. Thank you for proving that helping people doesn't have to mean destroying your own life." "That's exactly what the foundation exists to prevent," Noah replied. "You did something brave and important. You deserve support, not hardship." Summer arrived in a burst of warmth and possibility. The harbor filled with boats and tourists and locals enjoying the extended daylight. Mia turned 14 with a beach party that drew half her grade, and Noah stood on the sand watching his daughter laugh with her friends and felt Sarah's absence and presence simultaneously, absent in body, but present in every gesture Mia made, every kindness she showed, every moment of grace she embodied. One evening in late July, Noah received a call from Elena. They'd stayed in touch over the past year, occasional texts and phone calls that had evolved from formal gratitude to genuine friendship. But something in her voice this time was different, excited and nervous at once. "I'm calling with an ask," Elena said after the initial pleasantries. "A big one, actually. You can absolutely say no." "What's the ask?" "The Democratic National Convention is next month. Jonathan's giving his speech accepting the nomination for his second term. We'd like you to introduce him." Elena rushed on before Noah could respond. "I know you don't like politics. I know you've deliberately stayed out of that arena. But Noah, your story is about more than politics. It's about decency and courage and the best of what America can be. Having you introduce Jonathan would send a message about the kind of leadership we need, leadership that recognizes and elevates everyday heroes." Noah was silent, his mind racing. Introducing the president at the Democratic National Convention would thrust him back into the spotlight he'd mostly escaped. It would make him a political figure whether he wanted that or not. It would invite scrutiny and criticism and the whole exhausting circus of partisan politics. But it would also give him a platform to talk about the foundation, about civilian heroism, about the values he'd spent the past year promoting. It would put him in front of millions of people who might be inspired to take CPR classes, to support the foundation, to choose courage in their own lives. "Can I think about it?" he asked finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need, but Noah, I wouldn't ask if I didn't think this was important. Not for Jonathan's campaign, but for the larger message we're trying to send about what kind of country we want to be." Noah discussed it with Mia over dinner that night, laying out the pros and cons, asking for her perspective. She listened carefully, chewing her bottom lip the way Sarah used to when processing difficult decisions. "It's going to make things crazy again," Mia said eventually. "The media attention will come back. People will have opinions about everything you say. It'll be like those first few weeks after the rescue all over again." "I know. Which is why I want your input. This affects you too." Mia set down her fork, looking at her father with eyes that seemed far too mature for 14. "Daddy, if you don't do this, will you regret it?" The question cut straight to the heart of the matter. Noah thought about all the choices he'd made in the past year, diving into the hurricane, accepting the foundation role, expanding their mission, every small decision to choose courage over comfort. Would he regret adding his voice to a national conversation about leadership and values? Probably, he admitted. Then you should do it. We'll handle whatever comes after together. We always do. Noah called Elena back that night and accepted. The next month was a blur of preparation, writing and rewriting his speech, practicing delivery, coordinating with convention organizers, managing the inevitable media interest in his role. But through it all, Noah kept his focus on what mattered, using this platform to advance the Foundation's mission, to celebrate civilian heroism, to remind people that courage came in many forms. The Democratic National Convention was held in Chicago, a massive production with thousands of delegates and hundreds of thousands of spectators. Noah had been to exactly one political event before in his life, a town council meeting about zoning regulations. This was something else entirely, but when he walked onto that stage looking out at a sea of faces and cameras and delegates waving signs, he didn't feel intimidated. He felt clarity, because this wasn't about politics or parties or elections. This was about the same message he'd been sharing for a year, that ordinary people could do extraordinary things, that courage was alive in America, that helping others mattered more than personal advancement. "My name is Noah Parker," he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "A year ago, I was a dock worker in Briar Point, Maine. My biggest concerns were making sure my daughter got to school on time and remembering to pick up milk at the grocery store. I had no involvement in politics, no particular interest in national affairs. I was just a guy trying to get through each day and be a decent father." He paused, letting that ordinariness sink in. Then a hurricane hit, and I saw 2 people drowning, and in that moment, I had a choice: stay safe on shore or dive into impossible water to help strangers. I chose to dive. Not because I'm special or brave or extraordinary. I chose to dive because it was the right thing to do, and I had skills that might make a difference. That's it. That's the whole calculation. The convention hall was absolutely silent now, thousands of people hanging on his words. The woman I saved that day turned out to be Elena Rivers, our First Lady. The child I pulled from the water was Matthew, the president's son. And my life changed completely because of that rescue. But here's what I learned in the years since. The most important changes weren't the external ones, the media attention, the foundation, the medal from the president. The most important changes were internal. I learned that courage isn't a feeling, it's a choice. I learned that heroism isn't rare. It's everywhere, waiting to be recognized. And I learned that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about making the right choice when the moment comes. Noah looked directly at the cameras, at the millions of people watching at home. Tonight, I'm here to introduce President Jonathan Rivers. But before I do, I want to tell you why I believe he deserves a second term. Not because of policy positions or political affiliations or party loyalty. I believe in Jonathan Rivers because when his family nearly died, his response wasn't about politics or optics or how it would affect his approval ratings. His response was to ask how he could transform that moment into something that would help others. He created the Parker Foundation not to honor me, but to honor the idea that civilian heroism deserves recognition and support. He chose to use his platform to elevate ordinary courage. That's the kind of leadership America needs, leadership that sees the best in people and works to bring it out. The applause started then, building to something that felt like thunder in the massive space. Noah raised his voice to be heard over it. We live in divided times, cynical times, times when it's easy to believe that courage is dead, that decency doesn't matter, that helping others is naive or foolish. But I'm here to tell you that's a lie. Courage is alive in America. It lives in teachers who spend their own money on classroom supplies. It lives in neighbors who check on the elderly during storms. It lives in strangers who stop to help someone change a flat tire. It lives in the single mother working 3 jobs to support her family. It lives in the veteran struggling with PTSD who still shows up to mentor at-risk youth. It lives everywhere you look, if you're willing to see it. Noah's voice grew stronger, more passionate. The Parker Foundation has spent the past year recognizing and supporting these everyday heroes. We've provided financial assistance to families facing hardship because of heroic acts. We've taught thousands of people CPR and water safety skills. We've created a rapid response fund so that doing the right thing doesn't have to mean destroying your life. And we've done this because President Rivers believed it mattered, because he understood that a nation's character is measured not by how we treat the powerful, but by how we support the people who sacrifice for others. He turned toward the wings where Jonathan was waiting, then back to the audience. So, tonight, I'm proud to introduce a leader who dives into the water when others stand on shore. A president who recognizes that true strength comes from lifting others up. A man who saved my family by believing in the power of everyday courage. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, Jonathan Rivers. The convention erupted as Jonathan walked onto the stage, embracing Noah before taking his place at the podium. Noah walked off into the wings where Elena was waiting, Matthew at her side, both of them with tears in their eyes. "That was perfect," Elena said, pulling him into a hug. "Absolutely perfect." "Did I help?" Matthew asked, tugging on Noah's sleeve. "Did your speech help, Daddy?" "You helped just by being here, buddy." Noah crouched down to Matthew's level. "By being alive and well and reminding everyone what all of this is really about." The convention continued late into the night, but Noah and his family left relatively early, escaping the chaos for the quiet of their hotel suite. Mia immediately collapsed onto the couch, exhausted from the excitement and attention. "That was intense," she said. "Are you glad you did it?" Yeah, I am." Noah sat beside her, pulling her into his side. "I got to talk about what matters. The foundation, civilian heroism, the importance of choosing courage. That's worth a little political chaos." "A little?" Mrs. Chen emerged from her room in her nightgown, carrying tea as always. "My phone has received 47 messages in the last hour. 47. Everyone wanting to know about you, about your speech, about what it all means." "What did you tell them?" "That you're the same Noah Parker you've always been. A good man who did a good thing and keeps doing good things. That's all anyone needs to know." She handed him a cup of tea. "Sarah would be proud. Not of the speech or the convention or any of that pageantry. She'd be proud that you stayed true to yourself through all of it." The media attention following the convention was predictably intense but felt different than the initial wave after the rescue. This time, Noah was prepared. This time, he had systems in place, a foundation press person who fielded most requests, strategies for protecting Mia's privacy, boundaries he maintained without apology. He gave a few interviews, always steering conversation back to the foundation's work, always emphasizing that his story was just one example of the everyday courage happening all around them. And slowly, the attention faded again, as attention always did when the next crisis or scandal emerged to capture the public's imagination. Life settled into a new normal. Noah split his time between foundation work and being present for Mia, finding a balance that felt sustainable. The foundation continued growing, expanding its training programs and support services. They opened a second office in Chicago, then a third in Houston, each location staffed by people who believed in the mission of recognizing and supporting civilian heroes. On the one-year anniversary of the rescue, Noah woke early and drove to the beach where it had all happened. The day was clear and calm, the ocean gentle, giving no indication of the violence it had unleashed a year ago. Someone had placed a small memorial at the spot, a bronze marker with a simple inscription. "Here, courage chose action over fear." September 15th, 2024. Noah stood there for a long time, watching the waves, thinking about the man he'd been a year ago and the man he'd become. So much had changed, so much had stayed the same. "I thought I might find you here." Noah turned to find Elena and Matthew walking across the sand toward him, both dressed casually, no Secret Service visible, though Noah knew they were nearby. "We're in town for the anniversary," Elena explained. "Wanted to pay our respects to the place that changed all our lives." Matthew ran straight to the water's edge, his fear of the ocean apparently conquered by therapy and time. He bent down, picking up shells, examining them with the focused attention of childhood. "He's doing well," Noah observed. "He is. The nightmares stopped a few months ago. He's in second grade now, reading above his level, obsessed with marine biology because he says he needs to understand the ocean that almost took him." Elena smiled. "Turning trauma into knowledge. I'm proud of him." They stood together in silence, watching Matthew explore, the anniversary marker between them. "Thank you," Elena said quietly, "for everything. For saving us, obviously, but also for what came after, for building something meaningful from that moment, for reminding America that we're better than our worst impulses, for being exactly who you are without apology or pretense. I just did what seemed right. That's what makes it matter." Elena turned to face him fully. "Most people don't do what seems right. They do what's easy or profitable or politically advantageous. You've consistently chosen the harder path, the one that serves others instead of yourself. That's rare, Noah. That's precious. I had good examples. Sarah taught me about grace under impossible circumstances. You and the president taught me about using privilege to help others. Mia teaches me every day about resilience and courage." Noah smiled. "I'm just trying to live up to the people around me." Matthew came running back, his hands full of shells and sea glass. "Look what I found! This one's blue like Mia's dress from the White House, and this one's shaped like a heart." "Those are beautiful, sweetheart," Elena said, examining his treasures. "Should we bring them back for your collection? Can we give the blue one to Mia as a present for being my friend?" "I think she'd love that," Noah said, his throat tight with emotion. They walked back to their cars together, Matthew between them, chattering about shells and ocean currents and whether dolphins could talk to each other. It was ordinary and extraordinary at once. The First Lady and her son, spending a quiet morning with the man who'd saved their lives, no cameras or security or formality, just three people connected by a moment of courage and its aftermath. "We'll see you at the Foundation Gala next month?" Elena asked as they reached the parking area. "Wouldn't miss it." Noah had been dreading the gala. Black tie event, major donors, the kind of formal affair he'd never been comfortable at. But it was important for fundraising, important for the mission, so he'd endure the discomfort. "Good, because we're announcing a major donation that night. The Rivers Foundation, that's our family's charitable organization, is pledging $5 million to the Parker Foundation over the next 5 years. Elena's eyes sparkled. Seemed fitting to invest in civilian heroism, given how much we owe to one particular civilian hero. Noah didn't know what to say. $5 million would allow them to expand exponentially, to reach communities they'd never imagined serving, to train thousands more people in life-saving skills. That's incredibly generous. It's incredibly necessary. The work you're doing, it matters, Noah. It's changing lives and changing culture. We want to be part of that. After they left, Noah sat in his truck for a long time, staring out at the ocean, processing the magnitude of what the past year had brought. From dock worker to foundation chairman, from obscurity to national recognition, from a man hiding from life to someone fully engaged with it, using his platform to help others, transforming one moment of action into lasting change. His phone buzzed with a text from Mia. "Mrs. Chen is making your favorite dinner tonight. Don't be late." Noah smiled and started the truck. Home. To his daughter and his neighbor who'd become family and the life he'd built from the ashes of loss and tragedy. The Foundation Gala a month later was everything Noah had feared. Black tie event at a fancy hotel in D.C., hundreds of donors in formal wear, speeches and presentations, and the constant pressure to network and smile and be on. But it was also everything he'd hoped for. People genuinely excited about the Foundation's work, donations pouring in, stories shared about lives saved and heroes recognized. Mia looked stunning in a green dress that made her look far older than 15, and she handled the social requirements with more grace than Noah could manage. Mrs. Chen held court with a group of major donors, regaling them with stories about Briar Point and raising a child who understood what truly mattered. When Elena and Jonathan announced the $5 million donation, the room erupted in applause. Noah stood on stage beside them, overwhelmed by the generosity, by the belief in the Foundation's mission, by how far they'd come in just over a year. "This foundation exists because one man made a choice," Jonathan said into the microphone, his hand on Noah's shoulder. "He chose courage over safety, action over hesitation, helping strangers over protecting himself. And then, instead of basking in recognition or profiting from fame, he chose to use that moment to help others, to build something lasting, to create a culture where heroism is recognized and supported." Jonathan's voice grew stronger. That's the kind of leadership America needs at every level. Not the kind that seeks power for power's sake, but the kind that uses whatever platform it has to lift others up. Noah Parker embodies that leadership. The Parker Foundation embodies it, and we're proud to support this mission in any way we can. More applause, more cameras flashing, more handshakes and congratulations. Noah endured it all with as much grace as he could muster, always deflecting credit to the foundation staff, always emphasizing the heroes they'd honored rather than his own role. Late in the evening, as the gala was winding down, Noah found himself on a balcony overlooking the DC skyline, escaping the noise and crowds for just a moment of peace. Mia found him there, appearing at his elbow the way she had a habit of doing. "You okay, Daddy?" "Yeah, baby, just needed some air." They stood together in silence, father and daughter, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. "Mom would be so proud of you," Mia said eventually. "Not for the gala or the donations or any of that. She'd be proud that you turned the worst moment of your life, losing her, into something meaningful, that you didn't let grief stop you from living, that you showed me how to be brave even when you're scared." Noah wrapped his arm around his daughter's shoulders, pulling her close. "I'm proud of you too, sweetheart, for handling all this chaos with grace, for staying grounded when everything around us went crazy, for being the kind of person your mother would be proud of. We're a good team, huh? The best team." They returned to the gala together, to the final speeches and thank yous, to the exhausting but necessary work of building and maintaining the foundation that had become Noah's purpose. And when it was finally over, when they were back in their hotel suite with Mrs. Chen already asleep and Mia heading to bed, Noah stood at the window one more time, looking out at the city, thinking about the journey that had brought him here. 15 months ago, he'd been a dock worker with no ambition beyond taking care of his daughter and getting through each day without falling apart. Now, he was chairman of a foundation that had recognized over 100 civilian heroes, trained thousands of people in life-saving skills, provided financial support to dozens of families, and fundamentally changed the national conversation about what heroism looked like. It was too much, and exactly right, all at once. Noah pulled out his phone and opened the photos, scrolling back to pictures from before the rescue. Sarah at the beach with Mia. The three of them on vacation in Acadia. Sarah in the hospital, thin and frail but smiling because Mia had brought her flowers. The last photo Noah had taken of his wife 2 days before she died, her hand in his, her eyes still bright with love despite the pain. "I did it," he whispered to the image. "I kept living. I chose courage. I built something meaningful. I'm showing Mia that loss doesn't have to mean the end of everything. I hope that makes you proud." His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Noah almost ignored it, but something made him check. "Mr. Parker, you don't know me, but I wanted to thank you. I saw your speech at the DNC and it inspired me to take a CPR class through your foundation. Last week, my neighbor had a heart attack, and I was able to perform CPR until paramedics arrived. Doctors say my action saved his life. I never would have known what to do if not for the training you made possible. Thank you for teaching me how to be a hero." Marcus Williams, Portland, or Noah. Read the message 3 times, his eyes blurring with tears. This was it. This was what all of it meant. Not the medals or recognition or galas with major donors. This. One life saved because the foundation existed, because skills were taught, because someone chose to act when the moment came. He saved the message, adding it to a folder he kept of similar stories. There were dozens now, maybe hundreds. People who'd taken CPR classes and saved lives. People who'd learned water safety and prevented drownings. People who'd been inspired by the foundation's work to be ready, to be trained, to be the person who helped, instead of the person who stood by helplessly. This was Sarah's legacy too. Her death had devastated Noah, but he'd transformed that devastation into purpose. Her grace in the face of impossible odds had taught him how to face his own impossible situation. Her belief in his essential goodness had given him the strength to keep being good, even when the world made it difficult. And now, through the foundation, through the work they were doing, Sarah's influence was rippling outward in ways she never could have imagined. Every life saved by someone with foundation training was, in some small way, a tribute to her. Every hero recognized was an echo of her own quiet courage. Every family supported was a continuation of the values she'd lived by. Noah sent a quick reply to Marcus. Thank you for sharing this. Your story is exactly why the foundation exists. You're a hero, and your neighbor is alive because you chose to be ready. That matters more than you know. Then he set his phone aside and headed to bed, exhausted but content, knowing that tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more opportunities to honor the promise he'd made to himself and to Sarah's memory, to keep living fully, to keep choosing courage, to keep building something meaningful from the raw materials of loss and hope and determination. The next morning, they flew back to Briar Point, back to the life Noah had built in the wake of disaster and recognition. The town had changed in the past year, more tourists drawn by the story, more media attention, a general sense of pride that one of their own had become a national figure. But the core of Briar Point remained the same. A small fishing community where people knew each other, looked out for each other, embodied the values of service and courage that the foundation existed to celebrate. Parker Point Harbor was busy with morning activity as Noah drove past on his way home. He'd gotten his old job back eventually, not because he needed it financially, but because he missed the physical work, the routine, the connection to the life he'd lived before everything changed. He worked 3 days a week now, loading cargo and fixing equipment, and the rest of the time he devoted to the foundation. It was a good balance. The foundation gave him purpose, but the dock work kept him grounded, reminded him who he was beneath the recognition and responsibility. Mrs. Chen was waiting on his porch when they arrived home, a casserole in her hands as always, ready to feed them and fuss over them and maintain the rituals that made life feel normal. "How was the gala?" she asked, ushering them inside. "Overwhelming and wonderful," Mia reported. "They raised so much money, Mrs. Chen. The foundation can do so much more now." "Good. The world needs more heroes, or rather, the world needs to recognize the heroes that already exist." Mrs. Chen set the casserole on the counter. "Noah, there's a young woman who came by yesterday looking for you, Sarah's college roommate. She's in town and wants to talk." Noah felt his chest tighten. He hadn't seen Emily in years, not since Sarah's funeral. "Did she say what about?" "Something about a scholarship fund. In Sarah's name." Mrs. Chen's eyes were knowing. "I think she wants to make sure Sarah is remembered properly." The meeting happened 2 days later at a coffee shop overlooking the harbor. Emily looked older but fundamentally unchanged, still the vibrant, energetic person who'd been Sarah's closest friend through college and beyond. "Noah, thank you for meeting me." Emily's hug was fierce. "I've been following everything with the foundation. Sarah would be so proud." "I hope so." They talked for over an hour, Emily sharing her idea for a scholarship fund to support students studying emergency medicine, nursing, or related fields. Students who embodied the values Sarah had lived by: compassion, courage, dedication to helping others. "I have some money from my grandmother's estate," Emily explained, "and I want to use it to honor Sarah, to make sure her name is associated with training people who save lives. It seems fitting, given what you're doing with the foundation." Noah's throat was tight. Sarah would love that. She always said the world needed more people willing to run toward crisis instead of away from it. "Then let's make it happen." The Sarah Parker Memorial Scholarship for future heroes. Emily reached across the table to grip his hand. "She was my best friend, Noah. Letting her be forgotten, that's not an option. This way, her name will live on in the people we help train." They worked out the details over the following weeks, coordinating with the foundation to administer the scholarship, setting criteria that reflected Sarah's values, planning an announcement for the 2-year anniversary of her death. It gave Noah something to focus on besides his own grief, a way to honor his wife that felt active rather than passive. The scholarship was announced in October, and the applications poured in. Students who wanted to be doctors, nurses, paramedics, emergency responders. Students who'd been inspired by their own experiences with illness or trauma to dedicate their lives to helping others. Students who embodied the kind of quiet courage Sarah had shown during her battle with cancer. The first recipients were selected in December, 5 students who would each receive full tuition support for their education. At the awards ceremony held in Briar Point High School's auditorium, each recipient shared their story. why they wanted to work in emergency medicine, what inspired them to help others, how they hoped to make a difference. Mia sat beside Noah during the ceremony, her hand in his, both of them crying as these young people, strangers who'd never met Sarah, spoke about wanting to embody values that had been her hallmark. "Mom's helping people even now," Mia whispered. "Even though she's gone, she's still making the world better." "That's what good people do," Noah replied. "They leave ripples that keep spreading long after they're gone." As the ceremony concluded and people mingled, sharing stories and congratulations, Noah found himself thinking about the journey that had brought him here. The storm, the rescue, the foundation, the scholarship, each piece building on the last, each choice leading to new opportunities to honor courage and service. He thought about the man he'd been 2 years ago, broken by Sarah's death, just trying to survive each day. He thought about the moment on that beach when he'd chosen to dive into the hurricane, the moment that had changed everything. He thought about all the choices since, accepting the foundation role, expanding the mission, speaking at the convention, creating the scholarship. Each choice had been scary. Each one had required courage he wasn't sure he possessed. But each one had also been right, aligned with values Sarah had taught him, with the person he wanted to be, with the example he wanted to set for Mia. And standing here now, watching scholarship recipients excited about their futures, watching Mia proud of her father and her mother's legacy, watching a community come together to celebrate service and sacrifice, Noah realized something profound. He'd done it. He'd transformed tragedy into purpose, loss into meaning, one moment of courage into lasting change that would ripple forward for generations. The foundation would continue growing, recognizing and supporting heroes across the country. The scholarship would send hundreds of students into careers saving lives. The training programs would teach thousands of people the skills they needed to help in crisis. And all of it traced back to one storm-tossed morning when Noah Parker decided that 2 drowning strangers mattered more than his own safety. That was the legacy. Not the medals or recognition or famous friends. The legacy was the lives saved, the heroes trained, the culture shift that made courage not just celebrated, but expected. As Noah drove home that night, Mia dozing in the passenger seat, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. Not the absence of grief that would never fully fade, but peace with his journey, with his choices, with the man he'd become through loss and challenge and the constant choice to keep moving forward. His phone buzzed with a final text before he pulled into his driveway. From President Rivers, watched the scholarship ceremony online. Beautiful tribute to Sarah. You're honoring her perfectly, not by holding on to grief, but by transforming it into something that helps others. That's the truest form of love. Noah sat in his driveway for a long moment after reading those words, his hand over his heart, feeling Sarah's absence and presence simultaneously. She was gone, but she lived on in Mia, in the scholarship bearing her name, in the values Noah worked to embody every day, in the ripples of courage spreading outward from one family's story of loss and resilience. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness, not entirely sure who he was thanking. Sarah for teaching him about grace and courage, the President and First Lady for believing in him, his daughter for giving him a reason to keep fighting, Mrs. Chen for steady support through chaos, the foundation staff for helping build something meaningful, all the heroes they'd recognized for proving courage still existed. Or maybe he was thanking the universe itself for the strange and terrible and beautiful journey that had brought him from that storm-torn beach to this moment of peace. Sitting in his driveway in Briar Point, Maine, a medal in his drawer and a mission in his heart and a future stretching ahead full of possibility. He was Noah Parker, former lifeguard, former dock worker, current foundation chairman, always and forever Mia's father. He'd saved 2 lives in a hurricane and built something lasting from that moment. He'd chosen courage over comfort, action over fear, helping others over protecting himself. And in doing so, he'd saved his own life too. Not from drowning, but from the slow death of giving up, of letting grief win, of forgetting that life was meant to be lived fully even, especially in the wake of loss. That was the real rescue. That was the story that mattered most. Noah Parker had saved the first family. But in the process, they'd saved him right back. And together, they were saving countless others through the foundation, the scholarship, the endless ripples of courage, spreading outward into a world that desperately needed to believe heroes still existed. They did exist. They always had. Sometimes they just needed someone to remind them.